learning should be memorable. And if you make it memorable, then you will, and you apply learning strategies. I believe I was working with a student who attended another college, and we were looking at learning strategies. I wrote a short blog about learning strategies, and I actually did a podcast about learning strategies and the plan and about student success. In fact, the study was done. Studies, you can find studies going way back to the 1970s, 80s, and even before that, looks at learning strategies. But even as we go into the 2000s and people start to rethink, and we start to think critically about things, and people start to apply critical thinking, not just to political and socio-political issues and historical issues, but even to learning, how we learn. And with the changes in technology, which also affect society and people, then, and even the ideas about how we think about society, we don't think about living in a male-dominated society anymore. I mean, we are as a society, the Caribbean, in the US and the world, and it's in the Western world, we're moving towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. We've always been talking about that, but especially since the rise of the Me Too movement and so on. And then lately, lately the US have been, and with the rise in populism from 2016, there are those who are challenging diversity, equity, and inclusion. In the US, we see the affirmative action being challenged. We see various courts and various states are trying to get rid of institutions that have policies that embrace diversity, equity, and inclusion recently. But generally, there's been a move towards diversity, equity, and inclusion. And part of the backlash and some of the policy shifts, which in a sense, that's going back to what we used to have, is the fact that the status quo, conservatives, traditionalists, there is always a backlash by conservatives, traditionalists, or the status quo, a backlash against their rule, against their dominance, against their privilege. And that's always the case. And you find that kind of backlash because there's a backlash because it threatens their position. Diversity, equity, and inclusion provides more access. And when there's more access, it means it limits monopolies. Yes, it prevents those from dominance. So there has been a backlash, especially when some time ago I spoke with you guys about what happened in 2009. From 2009, there had been a study exploring demographical changes in the US and the Americas, especially in the US, and which these demographical changes may affect policy decisions, which also affect islands in the Caribbean and countries. So when you study Caribbean thought, when you do Caribbean study, you cannot divorce it from what's going on geopolitically in the world. It's a course that considers geopolitical issues, because if we are studying Caribbean or we're doing Caribbean thought, and with it is critical thinking, and we have said at the outset that the Caribbean is an invention, and no one can deny that. There is no argument denied that the Caribbean as we have today is an invention. Which is made up of people who we call them hybridized people. Hybrid because it's a mixture when you start to study Caribbean and the peoples and and I said to you, if you were to look at if we did not have European influence in the Caribbean today, would the Caribbean look or resemble what it looks like today? Of course not, probably not. Okay. However, whatever the case is, I'm saying to you that there is always a drive to mitigate and to minimize attack against the status quo, attack against society, attack against culture, attack, okay? And so therefore, when you start to study Caribbean and looking at, fine, we are an invention of the Caribbean, but it's the inventing of the Caribbean. This is the bad thing. The Caribbean today, as it is today, is it invented? It's an invention, but why would we need to explore the Caribbean critically in order to go forward? What is wrong with the Caribbean being an invention? And of course, you start to study when the Caribbeans, when you start to look at the Caribbean, its invention and its position in the world, or when you start to study the dynamics of society, because part of studying Caribbean, part of studying societies, you're studying the dynamics in terms of the relationship between peoples inside of this, within the society, and those external to the society. When you look at the Caribbean today, we talk about structural adjustment and how structural adjustment has created the dependencies we have in the world. Okay, debt. The debt, how has created debt. What goes on politically and economically, the economics and the politics can affect the country. The religion and philosophy can affect the culture and the peoples as well. I interviewed Shelley Ann Fraser, who is the executive director for the Herflow Foundation. She talks about how religion plays a role in her efforts to help to address period poverty, where period poverty is a situation where in some countries, women and girls don't have the resources in order to protect themselves against their changing menstrual cycles. And as a result, they don't go to school. And that affects their education. It affects their poverty and their inability to raise their educational levels in order to develop their competitive currencies in the world. So, yeah, so we find how religion plays a role because we live in a very dominant masculine society. The conversations that we need to have around ending period poverty, we won't have those. There is always a backlash. From the traditionalists, from the church or whatever, because of the male-dominated society we live in. So it's very important that we study. So the point I'm talking about, we talk diversity, equity, and inclusion. Learning is changing in the world. And so coupled with all of the changes happening in over time, because I'm talking about how learning is changing, and we don't see And from I went to Jamaica Theological Seminary from 1999 to 2003, and in 2002 to 2003, I did a course called Learning Theories, and from that time when I was reading about learning and how people learn, or learning theories, one of the things that we've been talking about in learning theories is how learning happens. Learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. Learning, and by when we talk about in a vacuum, in other words, in isolation of all that's happening in society. Okay. Say, for example, I say to people, when you study societies, you have to study the dynamics of society. You have to go, you can't, say, for example, the immigration issue. The challenges in immigration cannot be, you are going to have a solution that does not deal effectively with immigration if you do not study the history that has created illegal immigration, and that has exacerbated the issue. Okay, and then of course when you start to look at study who are the people who are illegally leaving their countries to come to other countries, okay, illegally, that is. And the problem of immigration is illegal immigration. And part of that problem is majority of the people who are crossing the border illegally are poor people. Okay. And when you start to study brain drain, and when you and who gets to travel, so on and so forth, and how structural adjustment policies and neoliberal globalization where global South countries have to open up their economies and they open up their economies. Now they are competing with first world countries. That has helped to kill their economies, okay? Which has created the kind of movement. And then again, of course, who gets to travel? You have to have ties. You have to be connected, so on and so forth. You know, these are some of the things when you start to study the immigration. So you don't study things in. So learning cannot happen in a vacuum. Say, for example, someone made a point recently, and I'm going to share the point, and I tweeted something about it. Someone made a point recently on Twitter. Point was, you ever notice that Biden supporters never post anything pro-Biden? It's all just anti-Trump. So I responded by saying, not necessarily. That generalization or a conclusion based on inductive logic. Inductive logic. And I believe you guys are familiar with the study of logic. Logic is one of the branches of philosophy, and logic involves reasoning, and a way of arriving at truth, in a sense. And there is inductive logic and there is deductive logic, okay? And so what I said that not necessarily that conclusion is a generalization based on inductive logic, where you use instances that are known to you to make your conclusion. However, there are Biden supporters who we've spoken to, who have done the opposite of what you've experienced, okay? And that's one of the, so as much as we have the means and ways to arrive at truth, it's still not clear cut, because the human method of arriving at truth is still flawed, okay? It's still flawed. And there's always ways around it. So I said to you, so we learn in learning theories, you go to the learning, when you approach learning, it's not an empty jug. You guys, you students should not, you guys aren't empty. You don't come to the learning process, you don't come to the class as tabula rasas, a blank slate, okay? You tabula rasas. You come to the learning process as human beings, as Homo sapiens, who already have achieved Homo erectus. You come as evolutionary beings who are able to think, who have access to resources. Now, in the 21st century, you have access to resources, okay, that will help to support and aid your learning. And not only that, you are collegiate students, so you already have gone through some kind of rigors of learning. So therefore, we talk about sequencing when you learn, sequencing. When you learn something, one of the ways, when you make it memorable, is when you learn a new idea, or you're being introduced an idea that you are not on top of and readily exposed to. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't come with information and some knowledge. You still come with knowledge. You still come in. The professor cannot then be, as a human being, cannot be seen as just the arbiter of truth. Okay, now we think of teaching and the teachers as facilitators. Teachers are facilitators, okay? We are moving away from this idea of teachers being the arbiters of truth and people who don't make any mistakes. Teachers make mistakes. They're human beings. Yes, they are at a different level, but you guys come with something. You have stuff. Not only that, I'm against privilege. I'm against privilege, like Gramsci, privileging education. Okay, so yeah, so you come to the process with stuff. So you, and not only that, you have intellectual faculties that provide, and you have technological resources now where you can use your faculties to get information, and you also have memory. You can remember, or you can compare and contrast. And that's how you learn. You're reading, I'm like, oh, I remember I did this in class. This speaks to this issue. I'm talking about Caribbean thought, and I'm talking about tabula rasa. What does tabula rasa have to do with it? What does learning? Everything learning is interdisciplinary because life is complex and things are tight. So when you come to the learning process, when you come, so I said to you, we are moving towards a very inclusive society. So therefore learning should be inclusive. Okay. Learning is diverse, it's equitable. So you come to the process not as tabula rasa, but as intelligent beings. So I want to do, and you make learning memorable by when you are engaged with the learning process, engage with it, and you engage with it not by remembering all these theoretical concepts, but when you apply these concepts and these ideas and points to what is actually taking place in your own lives, in your own community, and in the world. Okay, that is why I invite you to engage with what's going on, read the papers, read the news, and engage with what's going on in the world. Today's class is a final class. I will be reviewing some very important points, but there are some things. There's one thing that we didn't get to that I didn't get to finish. Will I get to finish it today? But just so you know, there's something major that's happening in Jamaica. Recently, there is a media press release. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. What do you guys feel about Jamaica releasing this press release? The government of Jamaica has officially taken the decision to recognize the state of Palestine. And I'm going to read it. I think the government of Jamaica, and this is the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, on April 23, 2024. By the way, let me ensure that I'm recording. Are we recording? Yes, we are. Released a statement saying, entitled "Jamaica recognizes Palestine as a state," and the media and the release reads thus, and I quote: "The government of Jamaica has taken the decision to recognize the state of Palestine. The decision was confirmed by Senator the Honorable Kamina Johnson-Smith, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade, following deliberations of the cabinet on Monday, April 22. Minister Johnson-Smith advised that Jamaica continues to advocate for a two-state solution as the only viable option to resolve the long-standing conflict, guarantee the security of Israel, and uphold the dignity and rights of Palestinians. By recognizing the state of Palestine, Jamaica strengthens its advocacy towards a peaceful solution." In commenting on the decision, she said that the decision is aligned with Jamaica's strong commitment to the principles of the Charter of the United States, which seek to engender mutual respect and peaceful coexistence among states, as well as the recognition of the rights of people to self-determination. Minister Johnson-Smith provided further context for the decision by reiterating Jamaica's concerns regarding the war in Gaza and the ever-deepening humanitarian crisis, together with the government's advocacy for a peaceful resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict through diplomatic dialogue rather than military actions. The foreign minister reaffirmed Jamaica's support for an immediate ceasefire and the release of hostages and increased access to humanitarian aid for the people of Gaza, especially the many women and children who are suffering daily. She stated that Jamaica continues to support all efforts for de-escalation and the establishment of lasting peace in the region, imploring all parties to consider the dire consequences of further conflict and commit to diplomatic solutions, ensuring the safety and sovereignty of all. Jamaica now joins the 140 member states of the United Nations who have recognized the state of Palestine. Now, what do you guys think about that? Do you think it is within Jamaica's interest to make such a bold comment?
For me, honestly, sir, I think where that matter is concerned, I think they should have kept their mouths shut. But based on the question that you asked, I think that they think that it was within their interest to make that statement, and on that basis, that's why they did it. Because in terms of on a global stage, in terms of how we are viewed by other countries, we are small fries. So whether or not we think that the sky is blue or purple is really of no consequence to that many people.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. So you said because we are a small, vulnerable country, then we do not have the power
I
in
don't
order.
think, right. I don't think based on just to see how, even when you think about it, when we had watched Life and Death, for instance, how
Yeah,
we are viewed internationally by um by other countries, apart from the way that people esteem us in terms of vibes.
yeah.
People don't really their value Jamaica, what? There doesn't seem to be much respect internationally, if you get what I'm saying. Other than, for instance, who is right there hanging behind you, Bob Marley, or like our athletes or something. So it's like, for me, I think that the government would have done that because it would have been in the best interest of the country to do so. Granted, I don't necessarily have all of the information, but so for
Well,
me,
I mean, that's a good one. The question I would ask, you said, whether or not we make a public statement, it doesn't really move or shift the needle forward or backward because we're a very small country, with very little military power, very little economic power, political power in the world. That's the point you're making. So why would it?
Mhm.
But what? How does it benefit us
That is
to
it. But
to?
that is it now.
Or how does it benefit the people, the Palestinian people? What difference does that make?
And that
But
is it. I don't think it will make a difference for them. I think, oh gosh, it goes sound away,
yeah,
I don't think the motive was for, I don't think it was said in their, with their interest in mind. I'm going to be very honest.
okay. What
Yeah.
about? First of all, one of the questions I asked is, what of the relationship between Israel and Jamaica, or the U.S. and Jamaica, and what about what of that? I mean, Barack Obama did reach some time ago. I think it was 2016 or before that. No, no, not 2016, 2014 or earlier. Early in his presidency, made a bold statement advocating for the Palestinian people. The same kind of advocacy that the Jamaican government did. He advocating for the Palestinians. Um, but do you think that Jamaica's position, public statement, can also affect the relationship that we have with the U.S. or with Israel, especially now a war is happening right now? Do you think that can affect us in any way? And do you think that that has always been um, the challenge of the Caribbean, the fact that we are thermometers and not thermostats in the world?
That part.
Naturally, sir. Naturally, sir.
Yes, yes. Because I mean, say for example, don't you believe that we have a responsibility to also advocate for other peoples in the world? But you're saying our size, so maybe we should do it as a
Oh,
Caribbean, as
so,
CARICOM have done it. Maybe not necessarily Jamaica, but
well,
and why would they have waited until now? Because the war, the Palestine, I mean, this been going on from a very long time. Why did they wait until now? Is it that because we're not getting we don't necessarily rely on international aid as much as we do? I don't
okay.
know. Yeah.
Can I make a weird comparison?
And by the way, I did reach out to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade asking for an interview because I would love to ask these questions. But go ahead.
For me, I want to make a comparison. Because in terms of, for instance, when you think about apartheid, let's go there.
Yes.
Jamaica had a very big voice in
Yeah.
terms of speaking out against the apartheid that was happening, and almost in a sense shone a light on, like, hello, what we doing? That can't be right. And
Yes.
that sort of a thing. But I think that one was different because it was racial.
Yeah. Yeah.
In terms of this is big wig against big wig. Influence against influence.
Yeah.
And so it's
But I think Jamaica did it now because Jamaica, we could have done it a long time ago. Why did they wait till now? I think because more and more people, I think 140 countries, they join 140 other countries who have already signed. And I think this is important for Jamaica. When Haiti became independent, the world did not recognize Haiti's independence. But now we have countries and Black countries and independent countries that can now recognize their independence. So, in a sense, we all have to work together to bring about change, and I believe that those who are calling for the destruction of Palestine as a state, and there are people who don't recognize the Palestinian state. Israel does not recognize the Palestinian state, and they are at war with them. That's part of the problem. I believe part of social action and social justice and advocacy is about individuals and countries and institutions coming together to advocate for change. So if countries can come together, and then I think they'll be able to apply more pressure. And not only that, I think Jamaica has to know, Jamaica is trying to become a major player in the world. When a country is trying to become a major player in the world, then they make bold statements like this. And I have always argued that the Caribbean and Jamaican and global South countries and small states, they have to become major players in the world, not just in terms of what they practice, but what they preach. And they have to also get involved in international affairs. I believe that countries have a responsibility. Jamaica has a responsibility, for example. But I've also said, fine, you're advocating for Palestine. What's going on in Haiti? Are you advocating for Haiti? Right now, Haiti is we are petitioning for a Haitian-led solution, because even right now in Haiti, just so you know, the Prime Minister of Haiti has resigned. He stepped down yesterday. Day before yesterday, I sent 2 days ago, I wrote to Andrew Holness via social media, and also sent messages to the Minister of Foreign Affairs and so on. I said, yes, you have made a public statement about Palestine, but what's going on in Haiti, in terms of the fact that the people of Haiti have their own constitution, and we are partnering with the US to snub their own constitution. And you notice what they charted. You notice what the statement says, that we promote self-determination. The people must have the right to self-determine. And Israel is saying, okay, we will give you your independence. We will leave you alone, but only if you elect or identify a leadership that we approve of. Okay, that is anti-self-determination. That is anti-independence. That's anti-freedom. In other words, a country will only recognize another country if that country acquiesces to my ideas about politics and economics. Okay, in other words, that is what Israel is saying to Palestine. So, and I had boldly made a statement about that. I posted about that. I wrote about that. So recently, the Jamaican government responded saying, "Well, we are for Haiti. Israel. But what about Haiti? If Jamaica believes in sovereignty and nationhood, and statehood. And in the constitutional rights of countries. Why is it that we are not promoting and so public about advocating for a Haitian-led solution? We jump past Haiti and talk about Palestine. What's going on in Haiti today? What's going on in Cuba? And the fact that America has a long-standing embargo against Cuba because of its economic position. Yet Cuba has the right to self-determine. Yes? So part of my question is, if that is the Jamaican position, why isn't that the same? Why isn't that the same position? And why aren't we of Jamaica? And why aren't we making a public statement asking for a Haitian-led solution, asking that Haiti, Canada, France, Germany, and the countries that the external gang of 5 or 4 countries outside of Haiti that controls Haiti. Why is it that control Haiti? Is it CARICOM putting out a public statement saying we are against foreign interference of Haiti, and the Haitians should follow their constitutions, and we are willing to provide the resources that the Haitians need and the authorities need in order that they follow their constitution. That the oldest member of the Supreme Court should be the interim leader of the country and help to steer the country towards an election where they can elect new leadership. Okay. Anyway, yes, Alicia.
Sir, I was just gonna draw a line between what you just expressed and what it is that I had said, because what immediately came back to mind was the fact that the news article, I remember the news article that came out about Canada sending troops to train Jamaican soldiers to help to quell all the tension that is happening in Haiti. So for me, it's not even, we profess these things, and yes, we say that we care, but there is a motive behind the concern that does not speak to genuine concern for anybody else. It speaks to I do this so I can get this. I say this so I can have this. And not a genuine concern for anybody else, because it cannot be that. It does not make sense for literally your closest neighbors to be in need, and it's as if they don't exist.
That is true.
People who are on an entirely different hemisphere, who you don't know anything about them, which part them come from, you can't even assess yourself where the beginning of this war took place. It's selfish.
Well, I think
you're sure about that. Sorry, you're sure about that. Jamaica is not where it doesn't have a history with Israel, and there isn't any long-standing benefit. There isn't any favors.
No. I am not saying. Oh, okay. I'm not talking about Jamaica's history with Israel. I am speaking about the relationship between Israel and Palestine, and that sort of a thing. That's what I am talking about. That we ourselves probably don't even necessarily fully understand the depth of what is happening there.
This is interesting, because Jamaica is supposed to be a Christian country, a very traditional conservative Christian country. And the kind of Christianity we have is one that promotes the biblical Christian biblical theology understanding of Israel. And so it's quite interesting that Jamaica has taken the step, knowing that, of course, unless
it's not quite interesting, sir. It is important Jamaica take the stance, because guess what? Because of the long-standing issue because we know that if Israel and Palestine go at war, the entire world is affected.
Yeah, but no, my question, that's good. But what about, do you believe, but Israel but there are those who believe that Palestine shouldn't be a state, and there are those who use the Bible to say that it was promised that Israel would be reinstated again. Israel, one. And there are those who believe that this Israel is not necessarily physical Israel. They're talking about the future Israel as a people, and there are those maybe the idea of Israel, and there are those who believe that when talking about Israel coming back again, there are those who speak to the utopic society, that the new vision. So, but anyway, whatever the case is, there are those who believe that who believe that Israel is the promised people and the promised land and so on and so forth. So this is really an interesting time in term, and then of course this Jamaican government policy is quite interesting because they are also introducing policy to explore Obia. So it's quite interesting, Obia, and the church is against that. So it's quite interesting. I would love to look at what's going on in terms of politics in Jamaica today, the Jamaica Labour Party and their political and their political, not just the Jamaica Labour Party and the policies that they are embarking on now, and their conservative or liberal stance. It seems as if it seems as if that the Jamaica Labour Party is lately have been promoting a lot of liberal policies, while and over the last couple of years. That's quite interesting. What do you guys have to say about that?
About which part, sir?
About the Jamaican Labour Party over the past couple of years have been introducing a lot of policies which seem to be very liberal and not necessarily conservative or traditional.
America sneezed, sir. That's what happened.
Yes. Okay. This is quite interesting, but we're going to table that for now. So that's what's happening in the world. That's for something for you guys to think about. And please remember, this class we talk about the importance of self-determination, which is very important. We talk about nationhood, statehood, or nationalism. But we're going to table that. We'll stop right there as it relates to that. But today's class, I want to spend some time today to talk about several things. I want to there's so many things I want to do today, to be honest. Should I do this? Okay, this is the timeline list. Okay, what is 16 pages? Okay, I'm gonna go over 16. I'm gonna take well, I won't take a break yet. I'm gonna take a break at 5:50, but I'm gonna go over a list for you, and maybe I should origins. Okay, I'm gonna go over this paper. So let me share my screen with you. So there's something at what time does class finish? It's 3 to
Finishes at 7 o'clock your time.
So I have about, we have 2 more hours left. So 1 hour before the class, let me know, because I want to go over a quiz. Okay. So let me share my screen with you. Oops. Share screen. Okay. Now, I wanted to do this with you guys. This is very important. Caribbean Thought Lecture towards developing a Caribbean Thought academic journal. We had started this some time ago, and I want to spend some time to finish it. List of some, the information provided is a summary of the important thinkers we will reference in the course. We've referenced them, but I'm going to look at some current and reflections in Caribbean thought. Number 1, Arawaks for Africans, and I put some dates to 1500s to 1800s. Now, and this is really a summary of Caribbean thought, which I'm going to compact into one. Now, Arawaks to African is a book, as you know, and this period represents the historical transition in the Caribbean from the indigenous and, Arawaks to African is a book, but Arawaks to African is a period. And I say probably from the 1500s to the 1800s. The period represents the historical transition in the Caribbean from the indigenous Arawak population to the arrival and enslavement of Africans during European colonization. Now, the Arawak indigenous people were the original inhabitants of the Caribbean islands before the arrival of Europeans, with the establishment of European colonies, including the Spanish, English, French, and Dutch African slaves, were brought to the region to work on plantations, leading to significant demographic and cultural changes. Of course, this period marks tremendous influence of European colonial powers. There's also African cultural heritage, the development of, because a lot of the Africans came, a lot of African came to the region with heritage, with beliefs, with traditions, which were antithetical to European, to European, what the Europeans were trying to do, their project. Forced labor systems, those were the influences in terms of the philosophies and the ideologies of the period. European colonialism, racial hierarchy, and plantation economies. Next is Descartes. Now, I include Descartes not necessarily as a Caribbean influence, but for someone who has helped to influence Western civilization's thinking, and also helped to influence some Caribbean thinking, nationalist thinking. Descartes, from 1596 to 1650, René Descartes was a French philosopher, mathematician, and scientist known as the father of modern philosophy. He was the one that coined cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am, who says that, you don't really know, the only thing you really know for certain is what's in your mind, the reality of one's thinking mind. Influences ancient Greek philosophy, mathematics, and the scientific revolution. His philosophies and ideologies were rationalism, mind-body dualism. He talked about the mind-body. We touched on this early in the class. Foundation and foundationalism. His major work includes Meditation on First Philosophy, 1641, which explores the nature of knowledge, the existence of God, and the distinction between mind and body. If you know, phenomenology is the study of the mind, and he's the father of phenomenology. Now, Kant on history. Kant, and a lot of these thinking have come to influence the if you study the foundations of Western civilization and what we have today in our society, you cannot, it's not, today, the current of the Caribbean is not devoid from the currents, the philosophical, what gave rise to the philosophy of the day in Western civilization. Very important. So in terms, when you look at Immanuel Kant, and Immanuel Kant has said history is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstance, history. And so Kant was very important when I am developing the syllabus for Caribbean thought, because Kantian philosophy is very important, was an important influence in many skeptics and post-colonial skeptics. Okay, because if Kant is in his history said history is a result of the varieties of human nature and circumstances. So if history is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances, and he shows in his reasoning how history, how human circumstances and how human natures create positions and philosophies and understanding of history and what counts for society today. Yes, and part of what I'm studying at Georgetown looks at the foundations of knowledge. I'm about to release a book, an ebook looking at the foundations of knowledge. And one of the things we talk about is, depending on what epoch and what society you're in, will determine your understanding of the origins of life and society. Okay. But we won't get into it for this class. But if we do further studies and start to study Greek mythology, or you start to read Homer and you start to do liberal studies, foundations 1, 2, 3, then you will start to look at history and how various histories from the very beginning, from what we have from earliest man to now, it's really dependent on certain natures, human natures and circumstances. His influences of Kant, history is rationalism, empiricism, Enlightenment philosophy. Of course, his philosophies and ideologies were transcendental idealism, categorical imperative, if you know about the categorical imperative, and the moral philosophy. Of course, his major works was the idea of universal history with a cosmopolitan purpose in 1784, which discusses the nature and purpose of human history from a philosophical perspective. Now, if you guys are going to do ethics, or if you study introduction to philosophy, or if you study theology as well, the categorical imperative and of course Immanuel Kant will come up. One of the fourth thing we looked at, you want to look at, is The Social Origins of Jamaica by Nelson and Nelson. Was a book about the social origins of Jamaica. It's a book written by Nelson and Nelson, by Keith and Nelson and Novella Keith. It's Keith and Novella Nelson. It's Keith and Novella Nelson, and it explores the historical and social factors shaping, the socio-political factors shaping Jamaica. It looks at the social origins of democratic socialism in Jamaica, and of course, historical materialism, social stratification, and colonialism were their influences. Marcus Garvey, from 1887 to 1940, Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican political leader, entrepreneur, and Black nationalist who advocated for the empowerment and unity of African-descended people worldwide. Of course, his influences include Pan-Africanism, Black nationalism, Booker T. Washington, his philosophies and ideologies, African diaspora consciousness, self-reliance, racial pride. In fact, he helped to influence Rastafarianism. His UNIA and Back to Africa helped to drive this UNIA movement, this Black pride, and so on. He did the Declaration of Rights of the Negro People of the World in 1920, a historic speech addressing the injustices faced by the people of African descent and advocating for their rights and liberation. And, he is a major and significant figure in the US and in Pan-Africanism, Pan-African movement, and so on. And so I said to you, you're studying Caribbean thought, you have to look at one of Caribbean hero is Jamaica, who is not just a Caribbean hero. He stood up for Black people and Pan-Africans all across the Americas. Okay, so, and he also spoke for Black people all over the world, for people, and of course, so in the idea, under the influence of people like Marcus Garvey, I can understand why the Jamaica Labour Party would want to issue a statement like that, because Jamaica has always been little but talawa, very involved in making statements. Look at Bob Marley. Bob Marley was an international figure who not just talked about Jamaica, what's going on in Jamaica. He stood up for Africans and Black people all over the world, or injustices, or people who were abused. He stood up for those people all over the world, and I think that's part of our Christian responsibility as well. And we, as all peoples, we have a responsibility to defend the rights of others, but those within our neighbors, because that's what Good Samaritans are supposed to do. Okay, because when the Good Samaritan was passing a Jew and he helped, there are people who frown upon the Good Samaritan. Why are you helping the Jew? Why are you helping a Jew? Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. Why are you helping a Jew? But this Jew, okay, look beyond the culture of the day and help this Samaritan and help this Jew. Okay, that is instructive for all peoples of all walks of life up to today. So That is our Christian duty. That's our Christian responsibility, to help Jews and Gentiles and people all over the world. But the Samaritan was clearly a wealthy Samaritan who had the ability to help. And then the question is, Jamaica, when it's vulnerable state, do we have the ability to help? Anyways, George Padmore, 1903 to 1959. George Padmore was a Trinidadian-born Pan-Africanist and columnist, political activist, writer, and organizer. I've oftentimes talked about, and if you read Neoliberalism, my book Neoliberalism, the second part of the book looks at resistance. I compare George Padmore's nationalism with Marcus Garvey's nationalism. Okay, George Padmore was more anti-European in a sense. Many people saw black and anti-capitalism, while Marcus Garvey and Garveyites, while they eschew colonialism and so on, they still promoted the racialization of society. They still promoted an idea of capitalism. They still promoted Eurocentrism in a sense, or Christianity, or privilege in a sense, so to speak. While George Padmore eschewed that. He was Pan-Africanist, he was Marxist. Marcus Garvey was not Marxist. He was a capitalist. Yes? So if I were to ask you in the exam, what was the difference between George Padmore nationalism and Marcus Garvey's nationalism? Marcus Garvey he promoted back to Africa and promoted black nationalism, but a kind of nationalism that still embraced what his colonial masters had done to him. Okay. And in a sense, he took a book out of the KKK. There are those who didn't believe that, but I'm going to tell you now, yes, he sat with the KKK. And he believed that in order for black people to achieve freedom and real nationalism and nationhood, we have to start behaving like how the colonists behave. And so he would start. So he wanted to take a book out of the KKK book and establish that kind of philosophy. He promoted conservatism and traditional value. George Padmore was a little bit different, was against that, and he was a Marxist, anti-colonial movement. If you look at Marcus Garvey, you see him in his felt hat and so on, and the buggy and so on. He still kind of embraced a kind of black Eurocentrism, a blackness. While George Padmore was completely African and Marxist. His philosophical or ideological viewpoint in terms of George Padmore, he was an internationalism, anti-imperialism, socialist revolution, and of course, Marcus Garvey wasn't born in that within that period. Marcus Garvey started from the late 1800s. Okay, George Padmore lived in a time, especially in the 1930s, when there was a rise there was a lot of social issues, and there was this there was a rise of labor movements and so on and so forth. This movement towards populism and nationalism and so on and so forth. So of course you can see his ideological viewpoints and the fact that he differs from Marcus Garvey a bit. It stems from the period he was born into and what was going on at the time. And that is why I say to you, when you read, I can understand why Immanuel Kant would say that history is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances. Because when you study people and the ideologies that they have, as much as George Padmore and Marcus Garvey had the similar intentions, okay, the promulgation of black people all over the world and the freedom of black people all over the world, their methods were different. Okay, one was Marxist and anti-colonial, and one was probably anti-religious, or if he promoted a different kind of religion that was not European. While Marcus Garvey wasn't a Marxist, he wasn't anti-colonial. Okay, but yes, he promoted Pan-Africanism, but he did not eschew capitalism. All right, so that was I did not ask you that in the exam. I won't ask you what to do. I don't think I asked you that, but previous class I did. Major works, Pan-Africanism or Communism, 1956, explores the relationship between Pan-Africanism and Marxism and argues for their compatibility. So he argues for the compatibility of Pan-Africanism and Marxism. And of course, George Padmore influenced people like Frantz Fanon, and Frantz Fanon also influenced George Padmore. C.L.R. James, 1901 to 1989. Cyril Lyon Robert James, C.L.R. James, that's his name. Cyril Lionel Robert James, known as C.L.R. James, was a Trinidadian Marxist historian, journalist, and theorist. Isn't that interesting that he was born in 1901 as well, but Padmore was born in 1903. But again, he's Marxist. All the people that born in these times became Marxists because, and of course, quite rightly so. They became Marxists because of what? Because they grew up at a time when capitalism was the political, socio-political, the economic and political ideological ideology of the day, which has created the disproportionate realities of Black and brown peoples and people in the global South. So of course, yes, and people who were fighting for nationhood and freedom and independence. So you can understand. So Marx and a lot of these people took on Marxist ideologies. Okay, which was a departure from, of course, capitalism and what capitalism stood for. Notable comments is that he said the West Indians are not fully admitted into the Western culture. The West Indians are not fully admitted into the Western culture. That was in the 19 what? He made those statements many years ago. The 60s, and so on, 70s, the 60s, but he said, and to be honest, and up to today, the West Indies weren't fully admitted into the Western culture. They were not, but now we are becoming. When you look at what's going on with reggae and Bob Marley and dancehall music, and now dancehall music is all over the world. Now they have a new kind of music called Trinidad. Trinidad is Trinidadian dancehall. So Trinidadian dancehall is called Trinidad, and it's influenced by Jamaican dancehall music, which was influenced by other music. Reggae music influenced dancehall music. We talk about West Indians are not fully admitted into the Western culture. So reggae wasn't fully admitted. Dancehall wasn't. Rasta and our Creole, in fact, Creole, the language, they call it Creole. It's not language, okay? But he said that we have an opportunity to develop it. Excuse me, we have an opportunity to develop it. And when you do diasporan studies and see what the diasporan people are doing throughout the Americas and the Western world, it's quite remarkable. What is happening in terms of, say, for example, reggae wasn't fully admitted at the Grammys. Now, usually, and it's now, I think they would give the reggae Grammy award the day before the Grammys, and you won't hear anything about it. But I think that has changed. But in terms of sports or athletics and so on and so forth, that is our athletes. We are becoming a force to reckon with. Say for example, Usain Bolt, one of the fastest person in the world. But he said that the West Indians are not fully admitted into the Western culture, but we have an opportunity to develop it through. And so we talk about brain drain. We have the Caribbean have lost many people, but especially with technology and what we have in terms of technology today, it provides an opportunity for the Caribbean to be fully integrated into the Western culture, utilizing the technology that we have. Many Caribbean people are here in the US, and I've had opportunities to interview them. Say, for example, there's this thing called podcasting, and we say that Caribbean people are verbose. Caribbean and Black and brown people, they're very verbose. They don't like to write, but they love to speak. And I said to you, what contributions are we making towards the podcast and independent journalism world? This and we have a lot of medium. Sorry, we have a lot of media where we can showcase our work and so on. So that's very important. Another notable comment from CLR James, which to explore, is he said of Castro and the Cuba Revolution. He said, although Fidel and the Cubans aren't black, the attitude of their revolution is essentially a West Indian revolution, similar to Toussaint's revolution in 1802 to 1804 in Haiti. That's what he said in an interview, and I think I played it for you guys already. He said again, and I talk about there's always a symbiotic relationship or relationship between among the people of the Caribbean. We can't look at Jamaicans we can't be insulated, and and as some Caribbean countries, we have a way of being very inward looking and insulated. And I think that was the kind of independence that the Caribbean negotiated and arranged and we received was one that weakened our power, one that weakened us as a country. Because remember, when organization is power, when together we stand, divided we fall. So when the Caribbean got independence, it was a divided independence. Okay. And I believe that they would have, because the Caribbean, we were so small, I don't believe that we would have been able to, if we had looked down the road and saw what was coming. We call about the irony of globalization, what is neoliberal globalization, because they got an independence that ultimately made them vulnerable states based on what was coming. And the fact that the fact that the world became a global village. There was a movement towards globalization, and if you aren't competitive enough, you will be weakened by globalization, which is what globalization did. It weakened the independence that they just got. And if they stood together as one, they would have been able to weather the storm. And I think that's part of the problem. And even to today, many Jamaicans don't even know what's going on in Caribbean. In the Caribbean, they don't know what's going on in Haiti. And many Jamaicans are even opposed to helping Haitians or Haitians coming to the country. But I believe that that's what, and I've oftentimes said that. So there is a symbiotic relationship that was evident in the Caribbean in the early part of the 1900s, before our independence. We fought as one. Nationalists, politicians, and so on. They spoke as one, with one language. Okay, we weren't Jamaicans, we weren't Barbadians, we weren't Trinidadians or Guyanese. We were colonial, black and brown. We were Pan-Africans living in the global South. We were that's who we were. We didn't see ourselves as just Jamaicans, and so we saw ourselves as Caribbean people, and there was a movement towards West. In fact, Cayman Islands at one time was part of Jamaica. I believe that what the Caribbean needed to have done was to, but when you look at, if you just start studying the period of the 1930s all the way up, there was this unity that defined the Caribbean. And I said to you, notable comments. And I said to you, what did CLR James say about Castro? Castro, we're talking about Fidel Castro, who represents Latin America. But he said of Castro and the Cuba Revolution, because they were having a revolution in Cuba, he said, although Fidel and the Cubans aren't black, the attitude of the revolution going up to the 50s, I think to the 60s, we were all having, throughout the Caribbean and the global South, there was this revolution, there was this fight towards independence. Okay, the attitude of the revolution, the attitude of the resistance was a West Indian revolution. Okay, and that's very important. Haiti was the wealthiest colony, and the slaves that came to, he said that Haiti was the wealthiest colony, and the slaves that came to the West Indies were of fine physique and intelligence, so that they were able to withstand the Middle Passage. That's what he said. And that's very important. I agree with him. I believe that the slaves that came to the Caribbean, and those who, well, the slaves who came to the Caribbean were of fine physique and very educated, because they were able to withstand the Middle Passage. And not only that, they were able to learn the techniques of sugar plantation, and which made the Europeans select, and the Europeans were very selective in choosing the labor force that they needed, the willing labor force that they needed, okay, for the project that they were about to embark on, the transatlantic slave trade, or the triangular slave trade. So we talked about they were of fine physique, but when you hear, but when you read books and so on, the Caribbean, Black people weren't seen as people who were of fine physique, but they were of fine physique. And I said, when you start to study Obia and Voodoo and some of the African traditional beliefs, many of them came as a result of many of the spiritual leaders who came across the Atlantic as well, like Dottie Bookman. Tomorrow I'm being interviewed on a UK-based program on Podvine through Amazon, whatever. I don't know what a historical channel. They're doing a documentary. I will be on the documentary talking about Afro-Caribbean traditions and beliefs. It won't be released tomorrow, but probably in about a week or two. But this is quite interesting what CLR Dream said. He also said that Haiti was the wealthiest colony, and the slaves that came to the West Indies were of fine physique. Okay, yeah, we said that already. Sorry. Haitians and West Indians from Africa were very intelligent, as they quickly learned the techniques of sugar production in Western cultures, which must have meant that African society was organized and not backward, as it was originally written. Again, let me say this again. And I think this is my point, stemming from CLR James's point, because of what he said. Stemming from his point, I've come to the conclusion that Haitians and West Indians from Africa were very intelligent. Of course, they got the best Africans. You know, and I said to people, people couldn't come to the Caribbean on the transatlantic. They would have died by the time they would have been killed, or they would have died by the time they got to the shore. People couldn't come on the boat to the Caribbean. Okay, the rigors of the transatlantic would have because they would have certainly died. They got the best, the most tracting. They got people who were royalty, the chieftains' sons and daughters, the warriors. Okay, so Haitians and West Indians from Africa were very intelligent. And I'm going to make a very important point as it relates to this. So when you start to delve into this, when you start to read Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, when you start to look at the fact that Haitians and West Indians from Africa were very intelligent, as they quickly learned the techniques of production in Western cultures, which must have meant that African society was organized and not backward, as it was originally written. That's from critical thinking. Europeans took the best and brightest and strongest slaves. Many were princes and warriors, abducted in tribal wars stemming from the European strategy and the deal during the triangular trade. Just so you know, because there was a drug for guns for slave trade. We give you guns, you give us slave. Okay? And you want good, we will give you the best guns, the biggest guns and ammo or whatever. We give you the best stuff if you give us the best slaves. We want some mandingos. We want some strong, muscular people. If they, if the other African and just so you know, I said to people, when you study Africa before the triangular trade, you need to remember that Africans did not think of themselves as Africans as a people, as a race. and there was no race. People didn't think in terms of race. Okay, people think in terms of peoples, or they were very popular. Some people say tribal, but no, they thought they were a people, the Igbo people, yes, the Yoruba people, the Senegambia people, the Ashanti people. Okay, they weren't thinking in terms of race, and there was, just as how in Europe there was fierce competition. There was fierce competition in Africa, but the Europeans were smart in terms of how they worked together under the auspices first of the church, and later when there was a divide, it was Portugal and Spanish and the Catholic European countries working together versus the Protestant countries working together, okay, fighting against time to be the most dominant country, using their stealth, but they were one. Anglo-Saxon peoples working against the Africans who didn't think in terms of Africa as a continent. And it's, oh, African enslaved other Africans. But they never thought of themselves as Africa as a one. Okay? So when the Europeans came to them and said, hey, we will give us some Africans, and okay, and they were more than happy because they were already they were already fighting against each other. Groups of peoples, nations, African nations were always fighting against each other. So when the Europeans came and gave them guns, and said, we'll give you guns, then you become the most powerful African country. They gave them guns to go and to destroy and to plunder, and also to take the slaves. But in a sense, that helped to underdevelop Africa, because they got the best of the Africans through the okay, and not only that, they created chaos in Africa, because the thing is, the African nations and peoples they weren't thinking strategically in terms of how the Europeans were thinking. But the Europeans were thinking strategically. They were hoping for the underdevelopment of Africa, to weaken Africa so that they can take control. So one of the ways you weaken Africa, of course, when the gun for slave trade helped to weaken Africa, okay, because after the Europeans came and gave them and provided an opportunity for them to get weaponry to become dominant, then it engaged the Ashanti people, Yoruba people. They were all over Africa fighting against each other, taking slaves to give to the Europeans. But little did they know that the deal that the Europeans struck with one African nation, they struck with another African nation. And so all of these African nations were fighting each other, taking slaves and giving it to the Europeans. Until they became so weak. Okay, they had extracted all of their best and brightest peoples and strongest peoples. So now when that happened, it provided a very strategic and easy opportunity for them to invade and penetrate. Okay, and that's one of the strategies of and that also went into how Africa. And of course, Walter Rodney alludes to this point, but he does not allude to it too much, maybe slightly. I have added to the argument, which it will be part of my second book. C.L.R. James influences Marxism, anti-colonial movement, Pan-Africanism, Black liberation. His philosophies and ideologies: Marxism, dialectic, materialism, cultural and political resistance. Talk about the dialectic of whether we live to earn or earn to live, or the dialectic of looking at that kind of dialectical materialism, how societies are organized around production, the factors of production, and who owns the factors of production, and how the factors of production became to be owned by a certain demographic over others. Okay, anyway, that's what we're talking about. So Marxism, dialectical materialism, cultural and political resistance. Those were his philosophies and ideologies. Major works, The Black Jacobins, To Saint Alivature and the Saint-Domingue Revolution of 1938 examines the Haitian Revolution and its significance in the fight against slavery and colonialism. Of course, V.S. Naipaul from 1932 to 2018, recently died, was a Trinidadian British writer known for his novels, essays, and travelogues exploring themes of identity, colonialism, and post-colonialism. I don't know if I talked about V.S. Naipaul in this class before. Homi Baba talks about V.S. Naipaul a lot. She referenced his writing because he's a literary genius who was able, because he was a revolutionary. He was able to, in a sense, do what wasn't being done at the time. And his books, his writings were said to be part of the periphery. We talk about the center and the periphery. The center is people off center or off center. When we talk about the center and the periphery, we're talking about the traditional and non-traditional. So he was a non-traditional writer who promoted non-traditional characters in his book. The Caribbean, the poor, yeah, the black and brown man or black and brown boy. So the characters, the hero in his books, in his literature, in his writing, wasn't the usual white American or European. It was those things and those people who you don't usually see at the front. And so that was his resistance. His philosophies and ideologies were cultural hybridity, alienation, post-colonial critique, and his major work was A House for Mr. Biswat, 1961. It's a novel that tells the story of an Indo-Trinidadian man's struggle for identity and independence in a post-colonial society. It's called A House for Mr. Biswat. You guys can check it out later on. I hope you guys should read that book. It's quite interesting. Of course, there's Frantz Fanon. We've mentioned Frantz Fanon several times in this class. Frantz Fanon was a Martinican psychiatrist, philosopher, and revolutionary thinker. He wrote the book Wretched of the Earth. He was famous for being, in a sense, he was the Sigmund Freud of the Caribbean or of the post-colonial. He thought he was able to use the psychoanalytic theory to talk about colonial expressions of identity. He wrote the book Black Skins, White Mask, quite powerful and interesting book. He taught, but we did in this previous classes, I delved into Frantz Fanon. This class, we didn't really delve deep into Frantz Fanon. But Frantz Fanon is quite a significant figure. He died in 1960 or 61. I think he had cancer or something of the sort. He was very suspicious of the treatment he received from the American doctors and so on. He wrote that the post-colonial is a political creature in the global sense of the term. No matter where he goes, no matter where he is seen, his identity is taken for granted, and he's always at the bottom of society. His influences: existentialism, anti-colonial movement, and psychoanalysis. Of course, part of his ideologies was anti-colonialism. decolonization and racial identity. He is against race, but he promoted the black man and the white man in and of themselves. He does not believe in making comparisons between the dominant and something else. In fact, there is no dominant. There is no dominant, and he's against making comparisons or between, say, for example, he would say the white man, the black man is not, full stop. If you are in black skin, white mask, he's giving you an idea of he's giving you an idea of man, okay, within a racialized world by eschewing and moving away from a racialized traditional way of defining identity so as to not to commit the same crime. He says the black man is not. Who is the black man? The black man is not any more than the white man. Those are two sentences, okay? And he deliberately puts them in two sentences. The black man is not, full stop, any more than the white man, okay? In a sense, it was a novel way of eschewing racial pride and moving away from a traditional way of comparing and contrasting things. Okay, so for example, what's the difference between this cup and that cup, or that cup is bigger than that? He would never say that, okay? Because in a sense, he is against privilege. Everything has value in and of itself. So he moves away from a kind of identity of privilege and position. It's just quite another way. That's in Black Skin, White Mask. Of course, again, his major work, Wretched of the Earth, which examines the psychological and political effects of colonization and advocates for the liberation of colonized people. Walter Rodney was from 1942 to the 1980s. He was a Guyanese historian, political activist, and scholar known for his work on African history and the African diaspora. I believe he was assassinated in the 1980s. Alicia had asked me once in the beginning of the class, you know that my memory is good. Alicia asked me many moons ago about how he died, but not how he died. We know he was assassinated. He was assassinated by his own people. By his own people in Guyana. And he was hated by the CIA. He was hated by the CIA. And because he was against dictatorship and he promoted a kind of independence that was Guyanese, that was Marxist, anti-American, anti-European. And he was against the dictator of his country. Now, Americans and many Europeans had a problem with him. They believed he was a rebel, he was radical, but he was not, because he was against dictatorship, and he was talking about the dictators who were being used by America, because the US usually gets it wrong. Sometimes they get it wrong. The US is a democratic country and they promote democracy. But in Guyana, they were struggling with the dictatorship, but America was supporting a dictator, much to the protestation of Guyanese people who did not support him. And that's basically what's going on in Haiti too, because many Haitians don't support Dr. Ariel Henry. They want their own people. But, if the US supports a particular leader in a particular country, then what? Okay. Then it means that, and they have support from the local populace, it creates a problem. So the US is supporting someone who purports or pretends to be for democracy, but he was a dictator. And he was against the dictator, and so he was killed. He was, I think, he was banned from many Caribbean countries because at the time, Jamaica and many Caribbean countries, and of course, please remember in Jamaica there was a lot of there was fighting in Jamaica between JLP and PNP. Michael Manley and Edward Seaga. Edward Seaga was more pro Ronald Reagan, poor U.S. politics, while Michael Manley was, in a sense, pro Fidel Castro, pro communist, pro socialism, and so of course, so you can understand why Walter Rodney could not come. At one time, there was talk of banning Walter Rodney, preventing him from coming to some Caribbean countries, because some Caribbean countries also had operatives working on behalf of capitalist regimes, okay, who were supported by these regimes in the post-industrial countries, who did not want these countries to have Walter Rodney there. So I think Alicia had asked that question. And of course, when you start to look at what's going on in the Caribbean and what's in Jamaica in the 1980s, and then you understand why Walter Rodney was, the 1970s and 1980, why Walter Rodney was prevented from coming to Jamaica. Okay. Of course, his major work was How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, which analyzes the historical and economic factors that have contributed to Africa's underdevelopment. We'll talk, I'm going to revisit him in a second. Fidel Castro was from 1926 to 2016. He was a Cuban Fidel Castro was a Cuban revolutionary and politician who served as the prime minister from 1959 to 1976 and president from 1976 to 2008. He was a Marxist, Leninist, and anti-imperialist and a Cuban nationalist. Of course, his philosophies were socialism, anti-imperialism, and state control. A little bit on the dictatorship side. Part of what has dogged Fidel Castro is that he's a dictator, but he became a dictator. Why was he a dictator? Because he believed in order to prevent American penetration, he had to be a dictator. So in a sense, he was a dictator because he believed that in order for him to prevent American penetration and capitalist infiltration, he had to adopt dictatorial stance. Okay. Major works. History Will Absolve Me, 1953. A defense statement made by Castro during his trial following the failed attack on the Moncada barracks, outlining his vision for revolutionary Cuba. Michael Manley, 1924 to 1997. Michael Manley was a Jamaican politician who served as the prime minister from 1972 to 1980. 1989 to 1992. His major work, they said that his influences socialism, democratic socialism, and Jamaican nationalism. His major work was The Politics of Change in 1974, which outlines his vision for social and economic transformation in Jamaica. As against Edward Seaga from 1930 to 2019, he was a Jamaican politician who served as prime minister from 1980 to 89. He was conservative. I believe he was the father of Reaganomics in Jamaica and the Caribbean. He promoted market-oriented policies and was a Jamaican politician. I mean, he promoted Jamaican politics, helped to develop and formulate Jamaican politics. But they're going to tell you also garrison politics. Edward Seaga and Michael Mann was responsible for that. Bob Marley, 1945, died in 1981. Was a Jamaican musician, singer, songwriter, and activist who popularized reggae music worldwide. Influences: Rastafarianism, Jamaican culture, social and political issues. I wanted you guys to watch the movie Bob Marley, but I didn't get a chance to. If I ever get a hold of, if we have an opportunity to watch it, and you guys are available, I'm gonna show it on Zoom and have you guys come on board and you guys can watch it. Okay, I'll send you the link. But
which one of the documentaries is that? Sorry.
But not a documentary. The movie Bob Marley. Sorry, One Love.
Oh,
One
okay.
Love. So I was supposed to watch and play it for you guys. And I also have a documentary. It's available on YouTube. Marley, 2012 film called Marley. It's very deep. You guys can watch that. Okay, very deep. It talks about him, his story, his life, the philosophy of Rastafarianism and reggae music. Very powerful. Kamal Brathwaite, 1930 to 2020. Kamal Brathwaite was born. Edward Brathwaite was a Barbadian poet, historian, and cultural theorist. His influences include Caribbean culture, African diaspora, African and oral traditions. One of his major works include the Arawaks, a New World trilogy in 1973, a poetic trilogy that explores Caribbean history, identity, and resistance. So you can check that work out. And of course, his philosophies and ideologies were cultural nationalism, decolonization, and African-centered aesthetics. So a lot of it. So when you look at his poems and his work, it's geared towards that in a sense, and it promotes that. A lot of tropes from cultural nationalism. Edward Glissant, from 1928 to 2011. He was a Martinican writer, poet, and philosopher, known for his works on Caribbean identity, cultural diversity. His influences are Caribbean history, French literature, of course, Martinique. He's from Martinique, and Martinique was colonized by the French, and his influence African diaspora. Of course, his philosophies and ideologies were Creolization. He promoted Creole. He believed in Creole, and he eschews standard language in a sense. He believed in relational aesthetics. He believed in cultural diversity and identity. Where his major works were The Poetics of Relations in 1990, which explored the dynamics of cultural interaction, identity, and the history of the Caribbean context. An amazing work. And when you start to delve deep into his work, then you'll even have greater perspective in terms of Caribbean thought and Caribbean thinking. Stuart Hall, from 1932 to 2014, was a Jamaican-born cultural theorist and sociologist who made significant contributions to the field of cultural studies. Now, his influences are Marxism, structuralism, and post-structuralism, like Michel Foucault, who talked about the relationship between knowledge and institutions, and how institutions are geared towards a particular knowledge that helps to ensure the dominant culture. Major works includes, his philosophies and ideologies are cultural studies, identity politics, and post-colonial theory. And his major works include Encoding and Decoding in the Television Discourse, 1973. This influential essay explores the ways in which television constructs and conveys meaning, emphasizing the role of the viewer in decoding these messages. Of course, culture plays a very important role in decoding as well, but culture played a very important role. But can I tell you, also, a lot of Jamaicans are very enthralled by American media, Caribbean people. And that's one of the ways in which we talk about we talk about cultural penetration, in which some cultures get eroded. And not only that, especially when people, we human beings, we talk about the visibility of things, and how visuals are important, and how that's connected to the brain and the mind. And how, so I'm saying to you that, the Caribbean people and global South countries, as we become, our staple information is American. And so as we talk about culture and how cultures are changing based on television or media. And that is why it's very important for Jamaican and Caribbean countries to ensure that they develop their media if they want to protect their culture as well, and to not only make it visual, aesthetic, and not only that, governments must invest in their media at the outset, as you know, and want to become developed, want to become more competitive, then you can now step away from that. But we have a responsibility to develop our culture and develop cultural pride. But if our kids are being socialized by television and by social media, and if the social media that Caribbean people receive is heavily penetrated and influenced by the external, then what does it speak to our ability as viewers to receive and to decode? Because yeah, we are decoding. Just we tell like learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. Okay, learning doesn't happen in a vacuum. So when you begin to expose when one begin to expose themselves to stimuli, then how did that affect the individual? Now we watched a film, Life and Death, which is, and actually this morning I realized that week before last lecture is not available, and last week lecture is not available. I'm so sorry. Last week before last lecture we watched the film Life and Death, and I talked, and the textbook for this class is Neoliberalism, and chapters 10 and 11 looks at cinema and global. No, it was chapter 10. I think chapter 10 and 11 looks at cinema and globalization in the resistance section of the book, because I said the book is part 1 and part 2. The first part of part 1 looks at the socioeconomic dynamics of the global south against the global north, or is it provided historical analysis, with Jamaica being a case study. But the second part of the book, chapters, I think chapter 8 or all the way up to the last chapters, looks at resistance. And there are 1 or 2 chapters I talk about cinema and globalization, and cinema and globalization as resistance. And because cinema before the 1970s, or before the cinematic revolution of documentary film, cinema was sensational, and cinema would promote caricatures of Black and brown people as funny, as ugly, as not beautiful. And of course, the ideas that people have of the global south was one that was couched in islands of paradises where everybody's fine, including the Black and brown people. Okay. But so yes, so Stuart Hall talks about that, but he didn't go further enough, because he talks about the viewer, but you have to also talk about the viewer is decoding the film, but film also affects the viewer. So there is a symbiotic relationship between the film and the viewer, where the viewer is encoding and decoding, but the viewer is also encoding and decoding based on his influences, and how he had been influenced by the very same film and cinema. But Stuart Hall talks about the influence of television, but television is powerful in helping to create revolutionary change in society. Okay, it's very powerful. It helps to tell the truth, or to provide the especially documentary film, which uses 3mm format cameras to videotape, which is done so because it tries to make what is on the screen raw and dirty, because raw and dirty provide the suspension of truth. Kind of, okay. But Stuart Hall was famous for that. Some of his other major works, Cultural Studies and its Theoretical Legacies, examining the development and impact of cultural studies as an interdisciplinary field, discussing its theoretical foundations and key debates. I am a fan of Stuart Hall because I'm a fan of interdisciplinary studies. Interdisciplinary studies is quite profound and quite powerful, because interdisciplinary studies combines all disciplines. Okay, it combines all disciplines as in its analysis and its study of society. And it's important for us to do that because society is complex, yes, and it's a combination of several things. The West, he also wrote the book, The West Indies and the Rest. The West Indies and the Rest. Discourse and Power in 1996, which explores the construction of Western identity and its relation to the other in the context of global power dynamics. Of course, one of the best persons you want to look at is Rex Nettleford, because he talks about the external and the internal of what you want to be and what you are being made out to be. You can read that. It's quite a powerful book. I leave that to you to read. It's The West and the Rest. Homi Bhabha, 1949. He's still alive. Homi Bhabha is an Indian cultural theorist and post-colonial scholar known for his contributions to post-colonial theory and cultural studies. He wrote the book, The Location of Culture. I have a copy of it here. I've shown it to you several times, I believe. But he was born in Bombay, India, and then he left and went to the UK. I think he was a Rhodes Scholar, got into Oxford University, and he talks about the cosmopolitan and what is the cosmopolitan? What should the cosmopolitan be? The cosmopolitan is the colonial or the post-colonial who has left his country and now he's living in the former dominant country, and how that has shaped him and how his identity has become a hybrid, and then he goes back to his country. In a sense, he's an ambassador, but in another sense, he's not. But anyways, it's quite a powerful book. You guys should read it. He talks about the ideologies and philosophies that he influences: post-colonial theory, hybridity, and mimicry. I won't get into that in this. The last several other Caribbean thought class I've done, I've got some time to delve into mimicry and hybridity, but I don't believe mimicry and hybridity, you need to know that for this course. But if you guys want to, check it out, okay? But the major work is The Location of Culture, which is Bhabha's seminal work, which explores the concept of cultural hybridity and the ways in which colonial encounters and engagement brings about ambivalent cultural identities. What is he talking about? Because, say, for example, there are those in the Caribbean at one time. I don't know if it's the same today. And Homi Bhabha will tell you that when he got into Oxford University, the opportunity, it was the most defining achievement. The ability to study. And for Indians, and you know, it's when a Caribbean person gets a Rhodes Scholar or get an opportunity to go and study in the big country, okay, in the global north, at Oxford or a university, it's the greatest achievement in a sense. It's as if he has, and then, especially in England, it's the greatest achievement. The ability to speak the Queen's English and to develop English, to refine one's Englishness, the ability to refine one's Britishness. It's the greatest. The ability to get into UPenn from Jamaica. Even within Caribbean cultures, there is this hegemonic ideology, even within our own selves. well, we privilege international schools over the local schools. Notice the book. That's why the book is called The Location of Culture. Where is culture? Culture is with us. Culture is in us. At one time, there was a Jamaican, Spice, I believe, was invited to perform at an event in the US, which I believe it was an event, and many Jamaicans were upset, saying she's not being an ambassador, she's not representing Jamaica. How dare she do such thing? You know, that's not what Jamaican. And I was upset because, anyways. But many people believe that she should not have performed at the event because of what the event represents or who was going to go to the event. And they're saying, and then people would question her Jamaica, and she's supposed to represent that which is Jamaican, and that's the problem of culture, okay? Because we are doing the very same thing privileging or imposing group ideology on individuals who may do things that go against the group understanding. That's one of the things that we have to contend with as post-colonial figures and subjects. So Homi Baba talks about that. The cosmopolitan who now lives in the UK, who now lives in the US. How are they seen? In one sense, they are hailed as heroes. In one sense, they are hailed as something, but in another sense, they can be seen as sellouts. Okay, so who must they be? Okay, quite interesting. When we move, another book that he wrote was Nation and Narration. Nation and Narration, edited by Baba. Homi Baba edited that book. It's a collection of essays which examines the complex relationship between nationhood, narration, and identity in the post-colonial context. There's also Stephanie Black, who was born in 1954. She's a Jamaican-born American documentary filmmaker, known for her thought-provoking films that explore social and political issues in the Caribbean. Of course, influences documentary filmmaking. That's one of her influences. She helped to influence documentary filmmaking in Jamaica and the Caribbean, and also social justice activism. She's considered a feminist. Philosophies and ideologies would be social justice, anti-imperialism, grassroots movements, and of course, major works, Life and Death, the 2001 film Life and Death, which is a documentary. This is a documentary it's a documentary film which critically examines the impact of international financial institutions and globalization on Jamaica's economy and society. It's a book based on Jamaica Kincaid's. It's a film based on Jamaica's Kincaid, documentary film based on Jamaica Kincaid's book, A Small Place About Antigua and Barbuda. Stephanie Black also did H2 Walker, which explores the experience of Caribbean migrant workers, which employed in the agricultural sector in the United States, highlighting issues of labor exploitation and immigration policies. It was hard for Jamaicans to get visas to visit the US or Canada, but it was easy for them to get. But they were attractive migrant workers, and not just any migrant workers. They were mainly utilized in the fields, to work the fields. And while the Jamaican, especially the men and the women, were attractive in terms of their domestic, their domestic and hospitality skills. And I said to you, when you look at the kind of education that Jamaicans and the global South countries get, it's as if, and the investment in education, it's around hospitality, tourism, and of course, farm, agriculture, and domestic life. But, that was the idea for the Caribbean, to make the Caribbean domesticated and to also expose them to hospitality and tourism so that they can provide the labor to the service to the service sectors or work in the farms and the fields. That's, and of course I talk about, and then of course they don't, these jobs don't attract high wages. And I've oftentimes said that migrant workers, especially illegal migrant workers, because if you are legal, you have to have connections to come here. And if you have to have connections to come here, many of them come with their university degrees, so on and so forth, the people they want to come here. And they may not find them readily and able to work in the areas that they want to work. So the kind of migrant work that is really attractive is the illegal migrants who are willing to do anything and to work in these industries. Of course, there was for a long time a migrant work and a relationship between Jamaica and the Caribbean, which ended some time ago because many Jamaicans and Caribbean, or not Jamaican, Caribbean people was running off, in a sense, like running off, would leave their work and illegally and settle, you know. But it was very, they talk about the exploitation. He talks about, you can read that book, it's quite interesting. Stephanie Black, I'm sorry, you can read or watch it, watch the film. Jamaica Kincaid was born in 1949. She's an Antiguan American writer known for her evocative works, and that explore themes of colonialism, identity, and gender. Her influences: she influenced post-colonial literature, Caribbean culture, and history in terms of philosophies and ideologies that influenced her: feminism, post-colonialism, and cultural identity. In terms of her major works, she wrote the book Annie Johnson in 1985, which is a semi-autobiographical novel that delves into the coming of age experiences of a young girl in Antigua, exploring themes of identity, mother-daughter relationships, and colonial influence. In a sense, they said it's an autobiographical, a biographical novel. You call that an ethnography. It's really what she did was an ethnographical work in 1985. There was not much talk about ethnographies in 1985. There was talk about participant observation and participant research, but people start anthropological research and ethnographic studies really started gaining shape after Anne Johnson. So Anne Johnson's work was I believe the first ethnography in the Caribbean, because ethnographies or anthropology as a discipline is not necessarily old. It's a relatively new or modern discipline compared to sociology and other social sciences. She also wrote the book A Small Place in 1988. It's a non-fiction work which offers a scathing critique of neo-colonialism, tourism, and the legacy of colonialism in Antigua. That book was the inspiration behind Life and Death about Jamaica. So that's why I tell you, you see the symbiotic relationship between Jamaica, how connected the Caribbean is, okay? How connected we are and how close we are. Yet we are divided politically, economically, and we have CARICOM, but I still believe that there's more that can be done with CARICOM. More needs to be done in terms of engendering Caribbean unity, which is needed for Caribbean strength. Garnet Roper was born in 1954. He's still alive. I spoke with him some time ago. I think he's doing some work in Africa. He was one of the ones who helped to develop this course, Caribbean Thought. I have along with Garnet Roper. Garnet Roper along with, I can't remember his name, David Pearson, and then I'm the third professor, which I am planning on redeveloping this course at the end of this semester. I'm planning on submitting several books, essays, texts that reshape, rethink, and relook at Caribbean thought and reflection as a course. Anyways, but Garnet Roper is a Jamaican theologian, educator, and public intellectual who has made significant contribution to religious studies and social commentary in the Caribbean. Of course, he was also the president at Jamaica Theological Seminary. He was an ordained minister and pastor in the missionary church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. And the missionary church helped to start Jamaica Theological Seminary. He has influenced theology. In fact, not just theology, but he has helped to contribute to Black liberation theology at the time when, and in fact, he was very unpopular. He has been very unpopular. There are persons who have taken him to task. There are people who have maligned him, talked negatively about him, because he has tried to rescue Caribbean theology by being so vocal about including in our Caribbean doctrine and theology the idea of a theology that is relevant. In fact, today they're doing a symposium talking about Caribbean theology and our responsibility to respond to crime and violence. How does Caribbean theology provide solutions to crime and violence, which is a good course. We have always had crime and violence in Jamaica. But I believe that, I'm sorry, I'm going to say this. Crime and violence is an issue, but the Jamaican government has been doing much to help respond to crime and violence. Crime and violence is a major issue, not in all of the Caribbean. Crime and violence is a major issue in Jamaica. It's become an issue in Trinidad. Crime and violence has become an issue in Haiti. And part of the crime and violence and mayhem and chaos in fact, it's a failed state, Haiti today. Part of that stems from their socio-political history and the involvement of external forces in their country. So how does Caribbean theology respond to that? I think they're having a lecture, not today, tomorrow, looking at Caribbean theology and how Caribbean theology responds to that, but to crime and violence. But so I'm interested to find out how relevant this symposium is to what's going on in the Caribbean today. And not only that, in terms of looking at Caribbean theology and the symposium that they're having, we have to, part of the major issue that we have to contend with in Caribbean theology is the issue of our Afro-Caribbean beliefs and tradition. Afro-Caribbean beliefs and tradition is, okay, how does our Caribbean theology speak to that? Given that we have inherited a Christian religion that is antithetical to Afrocentrism, which is part of who we are as a people. And part of the thing that we have to reconcile is a Christian theology that is Caribbean. And when we talk about Caribbean theology should not just look at a Caribbean theology that is inherited. Caribbean theology is not Christian theology. Caribbean theology studies and reflects on the history, the present reality, and the history of our Caribbean thinking and philosophy today, our perspective as it relates to God. Means we have to look at Haiti and voodoo and the Catholic Church and the challenge and the conflict between voodoo and the Catholic Church. The conflict between conservative Christianity and Afro-Caribbean beliefs. How? Because Caribbean theology is not Christian theology. Caribbean theology within academia must utilize the principles of academics to apply critical thinking to the study of Caribbean theology. Caribbean theology must study not just Christian theology, or must explore why is it that there is, how do you reconcile between voodoo and Catholicism? How do you reconcile between Obia and evangelicalism? Okay, how do you reconcile between that? How do you reconcile between Eurocentrism and Afrocentrism, given our Caribbean thing? That is, okay, what our Caribbean theology must speak to what's happening in the Caribbean. Of course, we're talking about how does it speak to crime and violence. Crime and violence where? Crime and violence is not an issue all over the Caribbean. Crime and violence is only concentrated in probably 4 countries in the Caribbean. All the other Caribbean countries are largely free of crime and violence. They are only affected by vulnerable economic growth and development and penetration from outside. Okay? Now, there are those people who were attacking Garnet Roper because of his revolutionary and radical work as a Christian missionary, as a missionary in the missionary church. Okay? To still advocate for theology that transcends his personal perspectives and his personal beliefs. Of course, one of the questions, okay, we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Anyways, but his major works, so he has influenced theology, religious studies, Caribbean society, and culture. And he was influenced by Christian theology. He was influenced by social justice and cultural preservation. Yes, but he was also influenced by Black liberation theology. Just so you know that. You just add that. And Marxism. I'm going to add that, please. Because when I was reading, nobody said that, but I'm going to say that. Garnet Roper was heavily influenced by social democratic ideology, or socialism and Marxism, or George Padmore. Sorry, not George Padmore. In a sense, he's between George Padmore and Marcus Garvey. All right. His major works, Theology and Identity, the Impact of Culture upon Christian Thought in 2nd Century and Modern Africa, 1993, which examines the interaction between Christian theology and African culture, focusing on the formation of Christian identity in Africa. Also, Dr. Bird, 3 essays on Creole Jamaica, explores various aspects of Jamaican culture, including language, religion, and folklore, with a particular emphasis on Creole identity. Rex Nettleford, 1933 to 2010. Rex Nettleford was a Jamaican scholar, choreographer, and cultural activist. He started the Jamaica Dance No Dance movement. He has written several essays and works about talking about identity. When I was growing up as a child, I was enamored by Rex Nettleford. I couldn't dance though because I lived in a very conservative home. And I'm not going to say very conservative, because say for example, if you were a Protestant Christian, but if you're a Protestant Christian who go to one of the mainline churches, they were said to be, that was conservatism. That was traditional Christianity in Jamaica. Okay, the Protestant church, or the Presbyterians, the United Church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, comprising the Disciples of Christ, the Presbyterian, and who am I missing? The Disciples of Christ, the Presbyterians. Who am I missing, Alisa? The Congregationals.
The Congregational Church.
Congregational churches. Those, okay. The Methodists. That's the traditional church in the Caribbean. In the 1900s, and when you start the what they call the Pentecostal movements and so on. You have the evangelicals and then the Pentecostals, and then you have all these other church. Okay, and now you find that I think when I was pastoring in Jamaica in 2003 or 4 or 5, but even before that, but while pastoring at the United Church, one of the main and a lot of the churches that were part of the Council for World Missions. Jamaica Theological Seminary is not part of at the time was not part of the Council for World Missions. I don't know if JTS is now part of the Council for World Mission, but JTS is part of the Missionary Church in Jamaica, the Missionary Association. And the Missionary Association is, in a sense, they're not part of the mainline church, in a sense. But they but in a sense, recently, a lot of the missionary church and the Harold Blair's church and so on, they are now becoming part of the mainstream in a sense, and in effect, they are becoming more like the mainline churches now. But anyways, the Council for World Mission, they were more, in a sense, they adopted a kind of black liberation. There was the black liberation theology and movement, in a sense, took the mainline church in Jamaica and the Caribbean by storm. And a lot of, if you study some of the evangelical churches and the Pentecostal movements, some of them, they believe that the mainline churches are not, they're too liturgical, and the mainline churches were changing their liturgy because they were dying in Jamaica and across the Caribbean. They were losing members, they were losing money, and so there was a lot of talk about liturgical renewal in the 2000s, changing the liturgy, changing the understanding of worship or how they worship and so on, and was applying a lot of the evangelical and Pentecostal church liturgical styles so as to grow the churches and so on. But the point I'm making is that but the mainline churches, the conservative churches, which were the traditional churches or conservative, are now, in a sense, they are becoming more liberal in their stance, in their outlook. They are and more forward thinking and more inclusive and more adopting theologies. And that's what the difference when you think about Garnet Roper and what Garnet Roper is doing. But anyways, sorry, I don't know how I'm talking about that. We're talking about Rex Nettleford. But growing up, I was enamored by Rex Nettleford, and I grew up in an evangelical home. I went to an evangelical church, the Jamaica Evangelistic Center. My father was a pastor in the Jamaica Evangelistic Center. My mom was also a minister in the church. And so, the evangelical churches, they don't believe in, you don't dance. Some of these churches, they don't dance. They don't believe in national dance movement. It's anti-God. So growing up, I was not as exposed to Rex Nettleford, but eventually I found out more about Rex Nettleford, and I was enamored by this, because here is a black man looking night black who was so well spoken and was able to quickly learn the techniques of a global North culture or Britishness or Eurocentric. He was very exposed, and he was very skillful, and he was achieved and very poised in terms of how he spoke, and so he had developed mastery over European language, European art, European academic and understanding, and what he did, he was able to utilize that mastery to develop something, to still create something that was Caribbean. Earlier I talk about, C.L.R. James talk about West Indians not being admitted into into Western culture. But there's a way you do that. There's a way Homi Baba do that. What these Caribbean scholars and innovative thinkers have done is that they expose themselves. I think Rex Nettleford was a Rhodes Scholar as well, Louis Bennett. They were exposed to the highest form of post-colonial thinking, Eurocentrism. They developed mastery over it, but they never threw stones behind them. Okay, they use their knowledge as a way now to develop an indigenous Afro-Caribbean art, culture, history, identity, thought, and make it so, and make it Caribbean, make it West Indian. And then what they did, and then sell it back to the world. Bob Marley did the same thing. His music was Caribbean, okay? But he himself was pleasing to the eye in a sense because, you know, he was a mulatto in one sense, mixed, who was, well, whose connection to the global north has helped him, and his ability to be able to come to the US and his ability to, and his mastery over music and language, he was able to use that and turn that into something that was Jamaican. So when CLR James asked about being in the West Indian being integrated into the Western world, at the time that was not. But what did these currents, and the currents, these thinkers, these Caribbean scholars and academics that have done what they did, they exposed themselves and develop a level of mastery, okay, through their education and training, or through their travels, and then used it to create something that was uniquely Caribbean. And that is, okay, which in a sense you talk about cultural preservation. Rex Nettleford was about cultural preservation. Garnet Roper was about cultural preservation. In order to, okay, and in order, and they did that in such a novel way. Of course, his ideologies was, again, cultural studies, Afrocentrism, and cultural preservation. His major works, Miro Miro, which looks at identity, race, and protest in Jamaica in 1970, which examines the issue of racial identity and protest movement in Jamaica. And one of the things he talks about the correspondent, he was famous for developing the term, this corresponding identity. And one's personal identity and acceptance of self with one's international acceptance of self. And then you go to, say, for example, you go to another country and there's an idea of Jamaican. That Jamaican then fits himself into that idea of Jamaican. Suddenly we start talking Jamaican. Say, you don't sound Jamaican. Yeah, man, I'm Jamaican, man. What going on, man? Oh, you know, in a sense, all of a sudden, the cosmopolitan now reverts back. The cosmopolitan reverts back to something that he believes the external forces believes is Jamaican in order to become accepted as the thing that you are and you are not. Quite interesting. Of course, he started the Jamaica dance movement. I have my name here. I don't know why. I think I put it there because your textbook is written by your professor, Renaldo McKenzie. I was born in 1979. And you know, you see what they have done? I came to the US, exposed myself to training and development, and then studied Jamaica. You know, when I came to Jamaica, came to the US, I came to Jamaica to the US before. I was in Jamaica. I was in the US in 2006, I believe, or 5, as part of my ministerial training at the United Church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands. And I was enamored. It was interesting, you know, the way how people were, how they waste food and so on. Now, if you watch the TV, they're talking about how not to waste food. You don't waste it by freezing it. Most of the stuff, you just freeze it. Okay, or if vinegar is in it, the thing is good beyond itself. It's the shelf life. But it's quite interesting. When I came here, I said I wanted to. There's so much wealth. Why is it that we don't have that kind of wealth in Jamaica? And then I was exposed to a knowledge that in the 1950s, Jamaica was doing well. It was on. We were having growth of 5.7%. We found bauxite. But why hasn't that translated into the kind of competitiveness today? You know. So I said I'm going to study globalization, and I studied neoliberal globalization as a way to understand it. So, but I went to some of the best schools in the U.S. Some of the best schools. In fact, before I came to the U.S., I was living in Jamaica. When I graduated from high school, I went to Bridgeport High School, and then after Bridgeport High School, I got into Brown University. But I did not accept it because I never had any money. My twin brother had gotten into college here, so I decided I can't do it. So I didn't even know that Brown University was an Ivy League, one of the Ivies. So I never came here. But when I came here, I was very intrigued, and I said, I want to study this society from cover to cover. And so my ideas have mushroomed because I have really spent over the last, from 2009 to now, I have been studying. And when I speak with a level of authority. Okay? And I did 2 masters at Penn, and I did a pre-doctoral studies, and now I'm at Georgetown. So, and then I wrote a book, which was an erudite analysis of Jamaican economics, which many people think is a radical book, because I critique globalization and neoliberal globalization. I am critical of capitalism because of what capitalism has meant for the Caribbean, because capitalism hasn't helped us in anything. Capitalism has created a strategy of winners and losers, making sure that the Caribbean continues to lose and Black and brown people continue to lose. Okay. But I won't talk about me. I'm going to move right. It says one of my major ideas, Renaldo McKenzie, 1833 to 1865. This is a very important point. Let me talk a little bit about me, because I wrote while studying, I came upon a very startling thing. Between 1833 and, of course, between 1833 and 1865, Blacks working as slaves on plantation in the West Indies were freed as a result of the abolition of slavery in 1833 by the British Parliament. But the news never got to the West Indies until 1865. You remember, follow me here. Remember, this is one of the major ideas that I have developed after teaching this class and doing studies. From 1833 to 1865, Blacks working as slaves on plantation in the West Indies were freed. They were free. Are you guys following me here? Black people working as slaves on plantation in the West Indies were freed as a result of the abolition of slavery in 1833 by the British Parliament. But the news never got to the West Indies, to the British West Indies, until 1865, which means that the slaves who worked the plantation were essentially freed and worked without pay for over 32 years. If slaves cannot claim compensation before 1833, they can for loss of wages and forced labor from 1833 to 1965. Sorry about that, guys. I have to make a quick error. Now, by the way, that's why I like Grammarly. You can attach it to add it as an extension to your computer or your device, and it will edit any and everything that you wanted to. You can also quit it. You can go here, click on it, and then you can quit it for a particular thing that you're using. Okay. Anyways, but let me continue. This is a very important point. Again, one of my major, Renaldo McKenzie's major idea. Blacks working as slaves on plantation in the West Indies were freed as a result of the abolition of slavery in 1833 by the British Parliament. But the news never got to the West Indies until 1865, which means that the slaves who worked the plantation were essentially freed and worked without pay for over 32 years. Now, you heard that? Now, if slaves could not claim compensation before 1833, I'm saying if, they certainly could claim for loss of wages and forced labor from 1833 to 1965. If the plantation owners received insurance compensation from claims against the loss of property as a result of the 1833 Emancipation Proclamation, then why shouldn't the workers who labored for over 32 years as freed men and women not be, sorry, then why shouldn't the workers who labored for 32 years, who were free, okay, who were free, why were they not remunerated for their work? The insurance claims should have included loss of wages to such freed slaves and or the children and the grandchildren. But this was never done or pursued. However, why was the news of the slaves' emancipation delayed? Why did it take such a long time after slavery was abolished for it to get to the West Indies? Unless the plantocracy, crown, and government of the day, the dominant class, wanted to mitigate and prepare for and make up the potential loss of willing and cheap labor. And they did. The decision to end slavery required preparation, and while the emancipation was premature and sudden for some, the alternative offered greater profits in the long run. Indentured labor and servitude with bondservants from China and India. Hence, work and labor also experienced transformation. Work and labor also experienced transformation to chattel or indentured labor with less responsibility to provide total care for the worker, which lowered the cost in the long run for the planter class or the plantocracy or the plantation managers. Slavery was no longer needed as the type of work that guaranteed supernormal profits with the development of automation and the application of science in production. Hence, over time, the plantocracy gained as the move from slavery to indentured and then chattel and wage labor became more lucrative and the easier way to maximize profit while minimizing expenses, which slavery meant. Now, because with slavery, you have to take care of their housing, you have to take care of their health, you take care of everything, their food. Now, when we get rid of slavery, and then turn around and hire them back, we pay them pittance, and they still have to. No, they have to take care of their health care. They have to take care of their housing and food and so on and so forth. The slave owners don't have to do that anymore after slavery was abolished. But the former slaves never recovered economically. They left the plantations without any compensation, benefits, or remuneration. Remember, slavery was abolished in 1833, but we didn't get the Emancipation Proclamation. The letter didn't come to us, and it wasn't read to us until 1865. Okay, 1866. So what happened between 1833 and 1866 that the slaves were working the plantation without being paid while being free? What happened to that? So, of course, those who are, I have written an article about that. You can check it out. It's called Unpaid Freedom or Unpaid freedom, somewhere on the NeoLiberal.com or RenaldoCMcKenzie.com. I have written an article and it's available there. I think it's in RenaldoCMcKenzie.com in the Neoliberal post. It's called Unpaid Freedoms or something like that. I've also written other several works that include Tyree Nichols, a Black academic response to police brutality within a cultural violence. That was not published by myself. It was published. I wrote the article, and the essay, and published it as an essay in a magazine called You Need to Hear This. So on and so forth. Carl Stone is not, well, forget that. He's not, I mean, we'll forget that. Ian Baruma. Ian Baruma is a British-Dutch writer and historian known for his works on culture, politics, and Asian-European relations. His influences is journalism, cultural exchange, journalism, cultural studies, history, political science, Asian and European. We are running out of time. His major works, Orientalism. Baruma's book examines Western perceptions and representations of the East, that's Orientalism, particularly focused on the phenomenon of Orientalism and its implication. That's Ian Baruma, while Edward Said talks about Occidentalism, which is a book which examines Eastern perceptions and representations of the West. Okay, just so you know. Ian Baruma also wrote the book Murder in Amsterdam, The Death of Theo van Gogh, and Van Gogh, and the Limits of Tolerance in 2006, which explores the cultural and political tension surrounding the murder of the filmmaker, which looks at multiculturalism and also the broader issues of religious extremism and the rise of populism. Which the rise of populism was more so especially towards 2016. Mike Davis is an American writer and urban theorist known for his work on social and political issues, including urbanization and inequality. And I'm going to stop there. There's also Ramesh F. Ramsawan. We talk about that. He wrote the book, The Challenges of Structural Adjustment in Commonwealth Caribbean, which focuses on the impact of economic reforms and structural adjustment programs on the Caribbean region, analyzing the socioeconomic challenges faced by Caribbean countries. That's Ramesh F. Ramsawan. He's a Trinidadian scholar and professor at UA Cave Hill. And he has influenced, his influences was Caribbean studies, economic development, regional integration, and his philosophies and ideologies, economic analysis, development strategies, and policy making. There's also Andre and Gunda Frank. You can read that. Eli Kadori, which I won't get into. Kenneth Clark, which looks at Dark Ghetto, the dilemmas of social power, which examines the issue of social power and racial inequality in urban African American communities. I love how he defines freedom insofar as you are able to chart your own course. Antonio Gramsci, Samuel Faber, Howard, and Michael Greiseneck. The politics of Latin America, Stokely Carmichael, Norman Gervin, Ramesh F. Sawan, that's already come. Okay, so we're going to stop here. Brian Meeks, I don't know, you guys should have gotten this copy of this document. If you haven't, I'm going to send it to you, and you'll have, because I don't have time to finish this. We have less than 15 minutes left in the class. And I asked you guys to remind me, is there anybody in the class right now?
Sir, I'm here. Sir.
I asked you guys to remind me because I did something amazing for you. Okay? And obviously,
Sir, I came in late. I'm sorry.
I asked you guys, let me stop share. Can I tell you? I'm telling you. But there were 5 persons in the class, and there now only 4. Who was the 5th? Oh, Feldman. Is that Feldman? No, that's not it.
Sir, I knew you said something about pausing at 4:15, but I forgot that you actually wanted us to remind.
Oh my God, this is what I want to share the screen with you. All right. Yes, the exam is week after next. And what I did was what I have done with all the classes I have taught, was to discuss with you the quiz for the exam, and I never got a chance. The quiz is going to be split up in stop share in 4 sections, or the final exam is going to be split in 4 sections. Where's the exam? Great. I have to go back to the exam. Caribbean. Is this it? This is it. The quiz is going to be split up in 4 sections. What is going on? Andrew Wallace. Go all windows, man. Come on now. Stop limiting me. The exam, Caribbean Thought final exam. I wanted to take a quick break, but we're running out of time, and you guys have I want to end the class at least by 7 o'clock. By the way, there's pen relays going on right now. A lot of Jamaicans are here in Philadelphia. Lots of Jamaicans. There's a lot going on in Jamaica in Philly. But the exam, it has 4 sections. The paper is divided into 4 sections. You're supposed to read and complete all questions as instructed in each. You're not required to attempt all the questions on this exam. Only 5 from section A, 3 from section 2, 4 from section 3, and 1 from section 4. Okay, which is an essay question. The last section is an essay question worth 25% of the total marks of this exam. You're supposed to read the entire paper once before you begin the exam. Identify what questions you will attempt first. After you have, again, let me say that again, read the entire, and you should do this for all your exams. Read the entire paper once before you begin. Then you identify what questions you will attempt first after you have reviewed the exam questions. Jot down any ideas that immediately come to mind while reading so that you don't forget. Then begin writing the exam. Do not answer any more questions than you are asked to do. Section A asks you to define, Section A, we've changed that. Section A asks you to differentiate between the following terms and measurements: global north versus global south, democratic socialism versus dependent capitalism, capitalism versus Marxism, Orientalism versus Occidentalism, granted versus taken freedoms, CPI of 0 versus CPI of 100. And please remember, you're supposed to differentiate between 5 of the following. Okay, I don't think if that's, I hope that's anyways, you're supposed, I remember, differentiate between 5. I updated the exam and I noticed that I don't see it. It's only said differentiate between. You're not supposed to differentiate between all of them, guys. Just differentiate between 5 of the following terms. Okay. A, B, C, D. A, B, C, D. Oh, no. and E. A, B, C, D, and E. You don't have to differentiate between all. So I just need actually, yeah, differentiate between 5. Section B says, answer 3 of the following short answer questions in 1 paragraph each. Answer 3 in 1 paragraph. What is it? Why is it considered a myth by some academics of the subaltern that that Haiti had once colonized the Dominican Republic? What separates Haiti and Cuba from other Caribbean islands? What is the difference between of Afrocentrism and Eurocentrism? What? Why is Obia considered evil? Why is Obia considered evil? Wait, don't I have that already? No, I don't. Right. Why is Obia considered evil? And what is the original purpose of voodoo and Obia? What sociopolitical condition gave rise to reggae as a religion and philosophy? The Caribbean is said to be an invention. Who is credited with this idea, and do you agree with this description of the Caribbean? Section C. What major works are 4 of the following known for? Just 4. If you do all of that, I will only mark the first 4. You won't get extra grade for any more than for doing more work on the exam. What major works are 4 of the following known for? Explain the ideological bent behind their work and their major conclusion and or contribution. Example, Professor Ramesh Ramsawan, former of the University of the West Indies, wrote Structural Adjustment, asserting that essay was a policy that was a political strategy. Well, he wrote The Challenge of Structural Adjustment in the Caribbean. But if you just put structural adjustment, I would still take it, as long as it has the main theme in it. Asserting that essay was a policy that was a political strategy to transfer decision-making from the global south countries to the global north. He was heavily influenced by Michel Foucault and skeptics of capitalism and neoliberal globalization. He was not a Marxist, but advocated for Caribbean independence and integration, driven by Caribbean economics towards our development and prosperity. See, I even give you an example of it there, okay? That's exact. That's all you need to do. I have CLR James, Walter Rodney, Homi Baba, Frantz Fanon, Bob Marley, Edith Clark, Garnet Roper, Rex Nettleford, Norman Meeks, Jean Bertrand, Alice Steve. Section D. Write an essay on any one of the following. Should theology transcend culture? Write an essay arguing whether or not you believe that theology should or should not transcend culture. The Jamaican government has announced that it will begin open discussions on the legalization of Obia in Jamaica. Write an essay arguing for or against legalization of Obia. Haiti is said to be the first and only Black country to have led a successful slave revolt against the French to garner its independence. The Caribbean is said to be made up of putative independent nations. How would you defend or deny the purity of Caribbean independence? It is said that Haiti colonized the DR between 1822 and 1844. However, many historians, such as Eller, argued that Haiti's takeover of Dominican Republic was a lie created by the US and former colonial powers, including Spain. Do you agree or disagree with this narrative that Haitians colonized the Dominican Republic? Explain why you agree or disagree. And finally, documentary films such as Life and Death and Caribbean post-colonial skeptics such as Ramesh Ramsawan and David Witter argue that the Caribbean's position of dependency and unstable development is a result of structural development policies imposed by post-industrial countries of the global north. However, some argue that Caribbean politicians and leaders were weak-kneed and lacked vision, while others, such as Professor Trevor Monroe of the National Integrity Agency in 2014, in a 2014 documentary film entitled Combating Corruption in Jamaica, blamed political mismanagement of funds and corruption as slowing Jamaica's development. Write an essay making a case for what you believe is responsible for Jamaica's and the Caribbean position today as dependent, vulnerable, and uncompetitive states. That is the exam paper, okay? What do you guys think so far?
It
I,
seems manageable.
I think studying needs to start like yesterday. That's what I think.
Okay, let me ask a question. What's the global north?
What's that, sir? What is the what?
What's the global north as against the global south? What's the global north?
What is the global norm?
The global north?
Oh, north. Oh,
Yeah. What's the
good
global?
question.
When we talk about the global north in relation to this class and as against the global south, what are we talking about? If I were to ask you, differentiate between the global north versus the global south, how would you answer it?
I'm guessing areas in the global north, meaning areas in the country where it's more well developed, as where global south means a bit underdeveloped, not as developed as much as the global north.
I think it's the developed global north would be the developed countries in the north. The global south would be the developed countries in the south.
Well, global south is usually never developed.
Okay.
Right. The global south, when we talk about language, I know we're moving away from discriminatory language. So usually we would say developed and underdeveloping or developing. First world, second world, or third world. We no longer use first world, we say global north. We no longer use developing or third world, we use global south. So if you were to say global north refers to developed and the global south refers to developing countries or third world countries. That's it. You get a full mark for that. But the global north refers to the more economically developed nations, primarily located in the northern hemisphere, characterized by industrialization, technological advancement, and higher standards of living. In contrast, the global south comprises less economically developed nations, primarily located in the southern hemisphere, facing challenges such as poverty, underdevelopment, and dependent on the global north for aid and resources. But if you were just to say the global north is the new way of referring to post-industrial countries that's usually located in the northern hemisphere, while the global south is a term that we used to refer to countries who were third world or developing or whatever. Okay, that's it. Full marks. All right, next question quickly. Democratic socialism versus dependent capitalism. Democratic socialism versus dependent capitalism. Democratic socialism advocates for a mixed economy where the means of production are owned and regulated by the state, with an emphasis on social welfare programs and democratic political systems. Again, democratic socialism advocates for a mixed economy. That's why you hear democratic socialism. You hear that? Democracy and socialism talk about a mixed system involving, in a sense, involving capitalism and socialism, or capitalism and Marxism. But socialism advocates for a mixed economy where means of production are owned and regulated by the state. Okay, the means of production are owned and with an emphasis on social welfare. And in fact, the means of production are owned and regulated not by the state, but by private enterprise, and in many cases operating as quasi-government industries. And then with an emphasis on social welfare programs and democratic political system, but the social welfare programs are, say, for example, transportation, education, and so on. That's owned and regulated by the state. Jamaica has a, in a sense, they said in a sense, it's a mixed economy, democratic socialist economy. But there are those who believe that we're a dependent capitalist country. But what is dependent capitalism? Dependent capitalism, on the other hand, refers to a form of capitalism in which a country's economy is heavily reliant on foreign investment, technology, and expertise, often resulting in limited economic sovereignty and perpetuating dependency on external actors. And I am saying that Jamaica and many Caribbean countries today are dependent capitalist states. Okay, I've said that dependent capitalist states, a form of capitalism in which the country's economy is heavily reliant on foreign investment. That's true of Jamaica. Foreign technology, that's true of Jamaica and the Caribbean. And utilize a lot of foreign expertise, often resulting in limited economic sovereignty and perpetuating dependency on external actors. That is a dependent capitalist state. Democratic socialism is a mixed economy, like what they have in Cuba, where the means of production are owned and regulated by the state. That's democratic socialism. Okay? Mixed, the economy is mixed. The economy is not solely owned by the state. However, it's owned and or regulated by the state with an emphasis, but the emphasis is on social welfare. So even if you have private actors owning some of the factors of production, or the responsibility or the obligation on these companies, okay, towards the government is high. That is the democratic socialist country, as against dependent capitalist countries, which is different from capitalist countries. Which are not capitalist countries, post-industrial capitalist countries. All right. Now, what's the difference between capitalism and Marxism? Capitalism is an economic system based on private ownership of the means of production and the pursuit of profit through market competition. Marxism, on the other hand, derived from the works of Karl Marx. We talked about him earlier in the semester. He critiques capitalism for its inherent exploitation of the working class and advocates for a socialist society where the means of production are collectively owned and operated for the benefit of all. In fact, he wrote the book That's Capital, which is a revisionist history of Adam Smith's book, The Wealth of Nations. Okay. So that's the difference between capitalism and Marxism. Capitalism, if you want to talk, who represents capitalism? Adam Smith and Max Weber. Who represents Marxism? Karl Marx, of course. Okay. If you want to, the father of capitalism or Western style capitalism, Adam Smith. Marxism would be Karl Marx. Capitalism would be Adam Smith. Remember, capitalism is an economic system based on what? Private ownership of the factors of production, the means of production. In fact, if you are having a problem understanding or differentiating between capitalism and Marxism, just ask yourself, what is economics? Okay? What is economics? Because capitalism and Marxism are systems in economics. Economics is a principle, a science, and a study that deals with the distribution or allocation of resources in society. And the assumption in economics is that resources are limited, but wants and needs or demand are unlimited. So if resources are limited, wants, needs, and are unlimited, therefore it creates a problem. Okay. So if resources are limited, then society now have to create a distributive mechanism in order to distribute and to allocate the resources, the benefits, or whatever the case is. some societies, which are capitalist societies or free market societies, capitalism, free market, they are capitalist, free market. They advocate for a system whereby the factors of production are owned by private enterprise. That's capitalism. Okay, they believe that the way in which goods and services, that buyers and sellers help to transact commodities. Okay, Marxism, there's no transaction between buyers and sellers. Prices is set by the state. And the way in which goods and services or resources are distributed within Marxist society is distributed by the state. The way in which it's distributed by capitalism is by the market. And the assumption is that the market is free and it's based on the transaction that takes place in the market between buyers and sellers. That is an assumption that I'm a skeptic. I don't believe there's no such thing as a free market. I believe that the difference between capitalism and Marxism is that in a capitalist society, they hide the truth behind free market. In Marxist societies, in a state-planned economy, so Marxist societies are state-planned, capitalist societies are free market. Okay? And there are certain assumptions in capitalist societies and certain assumptions in Marxist societies. But anyway, we won't delve into this because this class doesn't teach political theory. But we'll move on. If I were to ask you to differentiate between Orientalism and Occidentalism, and I mentioned it earlier today, Orientalism refers to what? The Western representation and interpretation of Eastern cultures, often characterized by stereotypes, exoticism, and a sense of superiority. Occidentalism, conversely, involves the Eastern perspective and critique of Western culture, often highlighting imperialism, cultural hegemony, and negative aspects of Western civilization. So Orientalism refers to the West and what they believe and their interpretation about the East, while Occidentalism involves the Eastern perception and critique about the West. That's it. Okay. Where am I? Granted versus, we're going to wrap up in a couple of seconds. Granted versus taken freedoms. Granted versus taken freedoms. Granted freedoms are those rights and liberties bestowed upon individuals by authorities or institutions, often subject to conditions or limitations. That's granted. Like Jamaican independence, Haitian independence, Guyanese independence. Or and then there's as against taken freedoms. On the other hand, are rights that individuals assert and claim for themselves through resistance, like what the Haitian Revolution was a take, and which result in what in their societies today. Because and I said to you, what differentiates between, and if you look at the exam paper, I asked you what the difference between granted freedoms and taken freedoms, and then at the top I ask you what separates some Caribbean islands. There goes the answer. I make it easy for you guys, but I want you guys to, sometime within an exam paper, it's written with the answer right there, or it's written in such a way that if you follow the flow, some things answer other things, and sometimes the professor deliberately does it so to help you. Taken freedoms, on the other hand, are rights that individuals assert and claim for themselves through resistance. Like, say, for example, the Haitian Revolution, the American Revolution, okay? The Jamaican. So, say, for example, if you were to say to me, granted freedom, an example of granted freedom is the freedom that Haiti, that Jamaica got from the West Indies. That Jamaica got from Britain. As against taken freedom, which is what Haiti, an American Revolution. That's the difference between granted and taken. I don't need anything else. I don't need something very long. You can give me an example of granted and taken freedoms, and I'll accept that. CPI of 0 versus CPI of 100. Let me ask, what's the difference between CPI of 0 and CPI of 100? And you know what CPI means, right? Corruption Perception Index of 0 as against 100. The Jamaica, okay. And if I were to ask you, does Jamaica have a corruption perception index above 50? True or false? Jamaica's corruption index is above 50.
Sir, why didn't you just say that instead of CPA, the abbreviated version?
Because I want you guys to. No, it's already said. See. Wait. The exam paper doesn't have. Oh wait. It doesn't have that on the exam paper. Oh wow. Okay. You know why?
It's a CPI of 0 versus CPI of 100.
I did it deliberately. I want to see if you guys are reading and follow the class. If you were following my class last week and watched the videos and everything, then you would know that you would know what CPI means, Corruption Perception Index. 0 means you are dirty. 100 means you are clean. Remember, that's it. A corruption perception index of 0 means you are dirty. The closer you are to 0, the dirtier, the more corrupt country you are. The closer, the more you get away from 0 up to, the more, when you get to 100, the more you are. A corruption perception index of 100 means you're clean. Clean, very clean. Okay. So that's CPI of 0 as against CPI of 100. You want to get a CPI of 100. Okay. Or above 50. Jamaica's corruption perception index is, I think, it's 46. Between 40 and between 46 and 47. Between 44 and 46. And that's it for the first section of the exam. Now, there are other sections of the other, where is it? The other section says answer 3 questions. Why is it considered a myth by some academics of the subaltern that Haiti had once colonized the Dominican Republic? What separates Haiti and Cuba from other Caribbean islands? I would do question 2. Okay. I would do question 2. What is the difference between Afrocentrism and Eurocentrism? I asked that question again so many times. I would do it again. Why is Obe considered evil? And what is the original purpose of voodoo and phobia? Okay. So just so you know, if I were, and these are short answer questions. If I were to ask you why is it considered a myth by some academics of the subaltern? And I should have asked you what the subaltern means. History from below. Of the subaltern that Haiti had once colonized the Dominican Republic. I should have asked what subaltern means. Oh my God. Anyway, some academics argue that the notion, and just so you know, anytime I set an exam, I sit the exam myself. I have the answers to every single one of these questions, and I'm reading from what I sat the exam myself. I'm telling you that, okay? To see how much time, how long it's going to take, and difficulty and so on. So I sat this exam. So I'm providing you with my answers. I set the exam myself as well. Based on what I did, I went back and watched all the videos and all the stuff that we've done. And then, so none of this I'm asking you is foreign. Why is it considered a myth? Some academics argue that the notion of Haiti colonizing the DR is a myth because it oversimplifies complex historical dynamics. Haiti and the Dominican Republic have had a tumultuous relationship marked by border disputes and power struggles, but labeling it as colonization overlooks the nuances of their shared history and the influences of external powers. Okay? The influences of external powers. We're talking about the Catholic Church and the Spanish, okay, who created the false notion for many years so as to sow a wedge between DR and Haiti so that their relationship can be shaky, and the Santo Domingo or Hispaniola can be unstable. Okay. What separates Haiti and Cuba? Haiti and Cuba stand out in the Caribbean due to their unique histories and anti-colonial resistance from social revolutions. Both countries experienced successful revolutions that led to significant political and social transformation, setting them apart from other Caribbean islands in terms of their revolutionary legacies and geopolitical positions. Okay. What is the difference between Afrocentrism and Eurocentrism? Afrocentrism emphasizes the contributions and perspectives of African cultures and peoples to human history and civilization, challenging the dominance of European perspectives, while Eurocentrism, on the other hand, centers on European cultures and histories as central to human progress and often marginalizes or ignores the contributions of non-European societies. So when the Jamaican government decided that they were going to begin discussing legalizing obeah, and many church people say, no, that's wrong, you can't do it, obeah is evil. I cannot believe that they said that. I cannot believe that. I was shocked that Jamaicans would say that, knowing Nanny of the Maroons. That was a Eurocentric position. These are Caribbean people, okay, who have been colonized and who have been implanted and embedded in their minds Eurocentrism, to the fact that they are now embracing Eurocentrism and calling obeah evil, which is just a Eurocentric position. Why is obeah considered evil, and what is the original purpose of voodoo and obeah? Obeah is often considered evil due to its association with practices that are perceived as harmful or manipulative, such as hexing, curses, and spell casting. This perception is influenced by colonial and Christian biases. Colonial and Christian biases that demonize Afro-Caribbean spiritual practices. However, the original purpose of obeah, like voodoo, was rooted in traditional African religious beliefs and practices aimed at healing, protection, and spiritual empowerment. These traditions served as a means of connecting with ancestral spirits, seeking guidance, and maintaining spiritual balance within the community. You understand that, guys? You got that?
Yes, sir. I'm here, sir. Yes, sir.
Great. Great. I hope I am going to try and finish this because I'm going to record it and have it available. This video will be available as soon as possible. I have 1, 2, and then this video to release. So you will have this video available. If you watch it, you'll be able to pass the exam. And if you review all that we have done, you'll be able to pass the exam. Okay. For those who don't show up to class or leave early, I'm not going to reach out to anybody who didn't show up to class today. I'm telling you that. And I know people who come, if I'm telling you, I do not pass or fail students. Students pass and fail themselves. And there are 1 or 2 students, we only have 7 people in the class, and there are some students who never come to the class or who come very late and leave very early. I am telling you this, I'm going to keep that in mind when I'm grading these papers. And if I remember some time ago, a student failed the exam. She didn't answer the paper, but you know what helped her? She was at every single class and she was very involved in class. Okay. There are ways you can get credits in my class because this is an online course and how you come to class and engage class will also determine whether or not you pass this class. And there are some persons who do not come to class, who do not come to the full class, who come when they feel like, who come at the beginning and leave before the end. And even if they come 1 hour early and the class goes until 7:30, at 10 minutes before the class they leave, I am not going to participate in facilitating, creating a culture of indiscipline, and mediocrity. So some people will some people will have to have a discussion with me after the course is over. Okay, but some of you who are still on this platform, you have been dedicated, and you obviously want to do well, and you guys are still online right now. Okay, and if you stay online and you go and you catch this video, then you'll be able to pass the exam. But I'm not going to do anything extra after this. After this, I'm done. Okay, I'm not. Now, some of you have to submit. So there's some other things that we have to do. Some of you have reached out to me. Say, for example, the research. Very important that you do if you don't give me any other work, ensure that you give me the research paper, the final paper. That's paramount, and of course the exam. Those two things are very important to pass the class, and of course the fact that and attendance. That's it's very important to passing this course. But anyways, let me continue to the fifth question. What socio-political condition gave rise to reggae as a religion and philosophy? Okay, reggae emerged in Jamaica during the late 1960s and 1970s, but actually it started from the 1930s and 40s amidst a backdrop of socio-political upheaval and cultural ferment. The music served as a vehicle for expressing the struggles for aspirations of marginalized communities, particularly the Rastafarian movement. Now, Rastafari, which emerged as a social religious movement in Jamaica, promoted messages of liberation, African pride, and resistance to oppression, which became central themes in reggae music. Now, the socio-political conditions of economic inequality and racial discrimination and political unrest in Jamaica provided fertile ground for the development of reggae as a form of cultural expression and social critique. Of course, many Rastafarians were against European and Eurocentric religions. They believe that had helped to create the condition of the black man, and so they believe that they cannot worship a God that has enslaved their peoples and them and continue to keep them down. So that's created, and they created the Rastafari. I mean, what am I talking about? I'm talking about Rastafarianism, but reggae emerged. So I apologize. Rastafarianism started in the 1930s. Reggae is different. That started in the 1960s and 70s. I'm running ahead of myself. Sorry. Rastafarianism, which is the religion, started in the 1930s. Reggae, which is the music of Rasta, started in the 19s, emerged in the 1960s and 70s. The Caribbean is said to be an invention. Who is credited with this? And do you agree? Well, the idea that the Caribbean is an invention can be attributed to Caribbean scholar Kamau Brathwaite, who argued that the region's identity and culture were constructed through a process of colonialism and creolization. Now, Brathwaite's concept of nation, language, and Thai dialectics emphasizes the hybridity and fluidity of Caribbean identity. Again, he argued that the Caribbean region's identity and culture were constructed through a process of colonialism from when the Europeans came to the shores, and of course, and what creolization in terms of our language and what extends from that. Of course, so Kamau Brathwaite said that, but please remember that Brian Meeks and Norman Gervin in the Caribbean Reader have also said the Caribbean is an invention. So if you say the Caribbean Reader, Norman Gervin, Brian Meeks in there talk about, then I'll accept that. If you said Kamau Brathwaite, I'll accept that. Okay. Whether one agree with this description of the Caribbean depends on their perspective on the region's history, identity, and cultural dynamics. Some may find Brathwaite's concept insightful in understanding the complexities of Caribbean identity, while others may view it as oversimplifying the region's diverse cultural landscape. I don't believe it's oversimplifying anything, okay? Because I believe that it is not oversimplifying it, but it is actually part of the historical evolution of the Caribbean. And to understand the Caribbean is to also understand its simplicity and its complexity. Section C. Of course, Section C is going to ask you to, Section C is going to ask you about, is going to ask you what major works are for the following known for: Sailor James, Walter Rodney, Homie Barber, Frantz Fanon, Bob Marley, Eddie, Garnet Roper. And just so you know, Sailor James is known for his works like The Black Jacobins, and he was a Marxist historian and political theorist. We talked about him earlier. I don't have to go through it. His major contribution lies in his analysis of the Haitian Revolution, highlighting the agency of enslaved Africans in their struggle for liberation. James's work emphasized the importance of class struggle and revolutionary movements in shaping Caribbean history and politics. Walter Rodney, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, is a seminal work in post-colonial studies. Rodney's Marxist analysis, of course, he was Marxist, but he was influenced by Karl Marx, and his Marxist analysis exposed the exploitative nature of European colonialism and its role in perpetuating underdevelopment in Africa and the Caribbean. His work inspired a generation of scholars and activists like myself to challenge colonial legacies and advocate for social justice and economic empowerment. Also, he influenced people like Garnet Roper, okay, Lewin Edwards as well, just so you know. Homie Barber, post-colonial theorist known for his concept of cultural hybridity. Talk about hybrid, we talk about mixture, cultural mixture, and he came up with the term the cosmopolitan, and how the cosmopolitan, the post-colonial subject who is from the global south leaves and goes to the global north. Who is he and who is he? Who is he in the global north? Who is he in the global south? And how he is evolving and who he is evolving into, and how he is represented and accepted by his own countrymen within and those without. Okay, so cultural hybridity, and you should be able to define cultural hybridity. Culture speaking to a way of life of a people, hybridity who have been colonized but still keep their Creole cultures and Afro traditions. Cultural hybridity is talking about the mixture and the influence of the post-colonial subject and his identity, his culture. Okay. So Homie Barber, a post-colonial theorist, is known for his concept of cultural hybridity and his critiques of colonial discourse. Now, his work emphasizes the complexities of cultural identity and the ways in which colonized peoples negotiate their identities in relation to dominant colonial narratives. I'm going to say this again. His work emphasizes the complexities of cultural identity and the ways in which colonized peoples negotiate their identities in relation to dominant colonial narrative. Just so you know, what are we talking about? Talk about the cosmopolitan. Remember, we talk about the cosmopolitanism and who the cosmopolitan is. We talk about the periphery and the center, or the traditional and the non-traditional, and how the traditional imposes itself on the non-traditional, and how the peoples of the non-traditional, when they are in the traditional, how that affects their view of all things. And then, of course, Homie Barber talks about the work of the psychoanalytic theorist Frantz Fanon, who helps to remove our tainted eyes. Yes? Anyways, but Barber's ideas have influenced debates on multiculturalism, globalization, and identity politics. Frantz Fanon is the last one. He talks about the wretched of the earth. He wrote the book Wretched of the Earth, which is a foundational text. And Homie Barber wrote The Location of Culture. Frantz Fanon wrote The Wretched of the Earth and Blackskin's White Mask. The Wretched of the Earth is a foundational text in post-colonial theory and decolonization movements. Fanon's work explores the psychological effects. So if you are studying counseling and psychology, this is one, this you want to take this guy's book and read it. Frantz Fanon explores the psychological effects of colonialism or colonization on both the colonizer, the white man, and the colonized, the black man, the black and brown people, advocating for a revolutionary violence as a means of liberation from colonial oppression. And the kind of violence he's talking about is not necessarily a physical one, but it's a one in terms of our principles, our methods, and our languages, our psychology, our psychoanalysis, and how we analyze. His analysis of the dynamics of power and resistance continues to resonate in contemporary struggles for justice and self-determination. Of course, there are others. There's Bob Marley, Edith Clark was a Caribbean American electrical, oh no, sorry, forget that. But Edith Clark, Garnet, we still Garnet Roper, but there's Edith Clark, and then we won't do any more. But section D, the final section. And I'm going to end with this section by just reading, by sharing with you one essay that I'm going to lift up. Should theology transcend culture? Write one essay, 2 to 3 pages. Sorry. Yeah, 2 pages. Well, no. 2 pages is enough. Write an essay arguing whether or not you believe, double space, that theology should or should not transcend culture. In your essay, and let me just bring it up. Write an essay on one of the following. It's worth 30 marks. So I don't want 1 paragraph. I don't want 2 paragraphs. I don't want 3. I want at least 6 paragraphs. Okay. And when you do this, when you when the question, these are the questions. And this is what I would like you to do. I want you to, if you were to do question 1, should theology transcend culture? You want to define theology and culture. Okay. So in your essay, you want to explore the following points. If you're asked to write an essay, should theology transcend culture? You want to define theology and culture first in the first paragraphs. You want to then explore historical and contemporary examples of the intersection of theology and culture. Okay. Then you want to provide arguments for and against the transcendence of theology over culture. And then towards the end, you want to suggest implications of either positions for religious practice, identity formation, and social cohesion. So if I ask you to write the essay, should theology transcend culture? I have written an essay before, and I think this is part of an essay. I've written an essay on this too, but you can write your own essay. This could be your essay, but this would be my response. I would respond like this. The relationship between theology and culture is a complex and multifaceted one, with scholars and practitioners offering differing perspectives on whether theology should transcend culture or be deeply embedded within it. To address this question, it is essential to define theology and culture and explore their interplay in both historical and contemporary contexts. And for those of us who are joining us, welcome. We are looking at an essay question, and we're wrapping up Caribbean theology class. This is the final 5 minutes, and then I wrap up. Okay, so the first paragraph, you saw what I did? Again, the relationship between theology and culture is a complex and multifaceted one, with scholars and practitioners offering different perspectives on whether theology should transcend culture or be deeply embedded within it. To address this question, it is essential to define theology and culture and explore their interplay in both historical and contemporary contexts. Theology at its core is the study of the divine, religious beliefs, and the nature of the divine being or beings. It encompasses doctrines, rituals, ethics, and interpretations of sacred texts within various religious traditions. Culture, on the other hand, refers to the shared beliefs, values, customs, and practices of a particular group of people, often shaped by factors such as history, geography, language, and social structures. Throughout history, theology and culture have been intertwined, influencing and shaping each other in profound ways. Religious beliefs and practices are often deeply embedded within cultural contexts, reflecting the values, norms, and traditions of a society. Conversely, theology has also played a role in shaping culture, providing frameworks for understanding the world, guiding ethical behavior, and fostering community cohesion. However, the question of whether theology should transcend culture raises important considerations. Regarding the universality of religious truth claims and the diversity of human experiences and perspectives. Proponents of the transcendence of theology. So again, I'm saying to you, let me say this again. The question of whether theology should transcend culture raises important considerations regarding the universality of religious truth claims and the diversity of human experiences and perspectives. In fact, depending on your position, your theological position, in other words, how you perceive God or how you do your theology, okay? And by that, I'm talking about a more humanist liberation theological perspective provides something else. Let me correct this. Do you approach theology from top down or from the bottom up? Proponents of the transcendence of theology argue that religious truths are universal and transcendent. A lot of Orthodox Christians, conservative, traditional theologians and thinkers, their theology is more from the top-down approach, a transcendence, a theology devoid of the humanity. Or if you were to study Christology, the theology of Christ, and they ask you what kind of, is it a transcendent one or a humanistic one? But proponents of the transcendence of theology argue that religious truths are universal and transcendent. Transcendent. To transcend something is to go beyond. Okay? Transcendent and applicable to all people regardless of cultural context. Transcendence theology. But I agree that general theology is applicable regardless of cultural context. I agree to an extent if you are looking at theology generally. But we have a theology that has been institutionalized and denominationalized. So if theology is institutionalized and denominationalized, and we know that Michel Foucault, influenced by Kant, have argued that history as a result, influenced by Kant, who have said history is a result of the varieties of human natures and circumstances, and Michel Foucault, who is skeptical of institutions, saying that institutions help to preserve a particular knowledge that preserves the status quo and the dominance. Okay, so then therefore, this is where I take my departure. Okay, because we have the theologies that we have today, they are institutional and they're categorical. And also inherited, and not only that, and cultural, to be honest. When you start to study Judaism and the Torah, okay, and then you start to study various cultures and their religions, or various religions and how they have come to emanate. They are not divorced from the people. But the Caribbean, being an invention from the European, brought with them their theology. A theology which is Western, which has been influenced over time through Roman, Greek, German, so on and so forth. But proponents of the transcendence of theology argue that religious truths are universal and transcendent, applicable to all regardless of cultural context. They posit that theology should provide timeless principles and moral guidance that are not bound by cultural limitations. I disagree. To the extent that the theology we have today is the theology, theologies are institutional. If you're talking about general theology, it's one thing. But if you're talking about theology that is institutional, which majority of our theology of God is based on a particular perspective, couched in a particular category of Christianity, Muslim or whatever the case, and even within Christianity, there's denominational Christianity, there's denominational theology. Because the theology of the Brethren Church is different from the theology of the United Church in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands, and it's different from the Council for Work, and it's different from the missionary church in Jamaica. So then, how can theology transcend culture? Unless we're talking about a theology that is speaking about the general understanding of God, devoid of any institutionalized concept or catechisms. They posit that theology should provide timeless principles. Now, on the other hand, advocates of the embeddedness of theology within culture emphasize the importance of contextualization and cultural relevance in religious practice and interpretation. They argue that theology must be understood and expressed within the cultural frameworks of particular communities, taking into account their unique histories, language, and worldviews. Because when you study the Torah or Judaism, that's what it is. Okay? It involved a way of life of a people in terms of how they wash themselves and how they clean. But now later on, men have interpreted that to mean how you must be clean. So now some churches say you have to be circumcised. No, circumcision is what the Jews did. And that defined them as a people. Okay? And then their cultural leaders wanted everybody to do it. So they apply what was the authority of the day? God. And said, this is what God expects of us. Okay? This is what God expects of us. But they were using the understanding or using the authority of God. We talk about so appealing. Okay, I don't know if you guys study. Fallacies and pseudo appeals, like false appeals to associations, for example, and logic and so on, fallacies. And they are, if you want, before the scientific revolution, if you wanted to entrench and to establish your authority, which is what the monarchs did, you appealed to God. Now, after the scientific revolution, you want to establish a position, you appeal to science. Okay? With some amount of God in it still. But they remove God and put science as the arbiter of truth because it served the status quo. It served the dominant class, or what they're about to do. Okay? Because science, okay, and I won't get into that too much. So it's very important. Circumcision is a cultural practice. It has nothing to do with godliness. Okay? It's a cultural practice of a particular set of people called the Jews or the Hebrews. That's what they did, and that's what they expect all Jews to do. All Jews were to do that. That was part of their culture. And not only that, and that was part of a society that was just developing, where you have to wash and keep yourself clean. And in those societies that did not have certain kind of hygienic techniques and so on, the way how people clean themselves now is different then. And so there are some things that they had to do then that you don't have to do now because of what we know and the techniques we now use. Okay? Part of their culture, you don't put parapet on your house. Yes? Part of their, so I mean, what we are talking about as doctrine is not doctrine or theology, it's culture. It's an expectation in terms of the practices of the people, and which define them, which make them Jews, which make them Hebrew. I tell people, I'm not Hebrew and I'm not Jew. I'm not. Okay? I am not Hebrew and I'm not Jew. Okay? I tell people that sometimes. But let me continue to say it. But anyways, so people who are against the who are more for the embeddedness of theology within culture, emphasize the importance of contextualization and cultural relevance in religious practice and interpretation. They argue that theology must be understood and expressed within the cultural framework of particular communities, like the Jews and the Hebrews. But if within in the Caribbean and you read our Bible, and the Gentiles' Bible, it also have Judaism. Just so you know, Jesus had a problem trying to prove to the traditionalists why the Gentiles were also Christians or accepted by God. They're not Jews, but they're accepted by God because they believe in me. So you have Jews for Jesus and Jews not for Jesus. But there was a change in tradition, and some Jews would say, no, they are not Jews. They can't be Jews. No, he said, no, they can't be Jews because now they are my brothers. Okay, they are now my brothers. They are now my sisters. Okay, if they are my brothers and they are my sisters, then they are Jews. They don't have to be born a Jew. They don't have to be circumcised to be a Jew. They don't have to follow all those cultural things to be a Jew, because those cultural things are just cultural, okay? They don't have to do all that to be a Jew. They just need to be, it's as if a marriage. I get married to somebody, I know I'm no part of that family based on the legal requirement that I have fulfilled, okay? The legal requirement for the Gentile was to believe in Jesus, who is a Jew. In order to be a Jew, you have to believe in Jesus. You know, as a Gentile, in order to be a Jew or to be accepted by God in the Jewish way, or to be part of that community or culture, then you don't need to do what the Jews do, except that you need to first accept Jesus. So when you saw the acceptance of Jesus Christ was the legal requirement for those who weren't born Jews, who were born Gentiles, to become Jews. And then the Jews privileged their position because Jews was the in thing. Everybody wanted to be American. Everybody wanted to be a Jew. You wanted to be a Jew. Jew was the in thing back then, and the Jews wanted to make sure that that's the in thing. But over time, there was fierce competition, and later on, those Jews for Jesus, those Jews who became Jews by believing in Jesus, they became more popular and dominant and became useful to the power brokers of the day. Okay? And I want you to understand what I'm saying. In order for you to be a Jew, in order to become part of the culture, and the Bible, and the New Testament, if you look at the context, the location of the New Testament, where is Christianity being developed? Where is all of these activities happening? It's happening in Jerusalem. It's happening in Jewish country. And if I'm a Gentile living in Jerusalem and living all over these areas that was heavy, like had a lot of Jews, and the Jews used to carry the weight. The Jews were the tax collectors. The Jews were the teachers. You know, everybody wanted to be a Jew, but nobody could be a Jew. Everybody wanted to come to the US, but everybody could not come to the US. But Jesus made a way, because you know why? Jesus believed in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So he said, fine, okay, we are not going to discriminate against these people, because since everybody have to be a Jew, and Jew was the high mark, so then he said, I accept them and they accept me. So now they are Jews. We can't treat them differently. We have to treat them now like brothers and sisters. You have to treat them like your brothers and sisters now. You can't treat them like they are different. Okay. But some people wanted to preserve the Jewish culture. They didn't want to share. They didn't want everybody, because if everybody become Jew, then they will lose their privilege. They will lose their dominance. Okay? If everybody is rich, then nobody is rich. You understand what I'm trying to say here? If everybody is rich, that's a problem. Okay? In society, in order for people to maintain their dominance, some people must have more of the wealth. So that's why I said to you, economic principle, which studies the allocation of resources amongst unlimited wants but limited resources, that is a lie. Okay? That is a lie. Or they have utilized a distributive mechanism that favors the few over the many, but yet say it's based on fair competition, when competition is not free, when you start to study structural adjustment and how they have made Caribbean into dependent capitalist countries. But I'm talking about this particular question here, theology. So if you believe in then you are all Jews. If you want to be part of the Trump family, and if you marry Trump daughter, then you become Trump. Or you bear my name. Once you marry into my family and believe in me, you know bear my name. And now you are now part of it. So that was important to Jesus. What is important to Jesus was that all of these Gentiles and all of these people who were said to be irreligious, that they become part, or not religious, or not Jewish, and treated as scum and so on and so forth, that they become, and they said the Jews and the Samaritans had no dealings. But if they believe on Jesus, then they become, that means they're literally marrying into the religion. They now become Jesus. They now become Jews. So and then you have Jews for Jesus and Jews not for Jesus. Okay? And then you start about, but the problem is, you don't want everybody to become Jews. And so now Jews was based on birth. But Jesus came and changed that and said, no, anybody can be a Jew. Anybody can be accepted as part of the Jewish community, the Jewish culture, not necessarily the Jewish faith, but the Jewish culture. Once you become part of you're accepted as part of the Jewish community, then you will get the benefits of the Jewish faith. The Jews privilege themselves, and not only that, and their God is the best God. And everybody was but you can't be a Jew. Okay, you can't get the benefits that my God can give you. You have to become a Jew first. So Jesus said, okay, I'm gonna fix that. He created a way where, by developing followers who follow him, by becoming brothers, they can become part of that Jewish community and culture. And by virtue of being part of becoming a Jewish community, becoming part of the Jewish brotherhood, now they can now get the benefits. They can now claim the benefits that the Jews have. You know, that is when you start to study history. So what is Renaldo talking about? Oh my God, he's a heretic. I'm not a heretic, guys. Okay, I am presenting, when you start to study the foundations of knowledge and the hegemony of faith, you start to really delve into the history of all things. So this approach acknowledges, so again, so people like myself who believe in the embeddedness, who more look, probably they're saying that instead of the transcendence, by the way, it's called immanence. The immanence, transcendence versus the immanence. On the other hand, advocates of the embeddedness of theology call the we talk about this, the immanence, looking at God from the immanence of God within culture, emphasize the importance of contextualization and cultural relevance in religious practice and interpretation. They argue that theology must be understood and expressed within the cultural frameworks of particular communities, taking into account their unique histories, languages, and worldviews. So later on, Christians, and you have new Christians who now start to say, I don't have to be a Jew. I don't accept it. I don't have to accept, okay, I don't have to, and even some Christians after the first 100 years of Christianity, in the early development of Christianity, there are some Christians who practice the circumcision. That not many persons practice the circumcision. And there were some people who were forcing Jesus to force his followers to do some of the things that the other Jews were doing. He said, fine, if they are Jew, then they gotta do this. They have to circumcise. They have, if they are Jew, they have to. How come they're not circumcised Jesus? They attacked and confronted Jesus about this. Okay, they're not following. They can't be part of the Jewish community, and therefore get the benefits of God if they don't do everything that a Jew do. Okay, if they're going to follow you and so on and so forth. Remember, it's all about being accepted in not the Jewish faith, but the Jewish community and the Jewish brotherhood. Because the Jews were first a people who have a particular way of a system of worship. So those who advocate for the embeddedness of theology, they argue that theology must be understood and expressed within the cultural frameworks of particular communities, taking into account their unique histories, languages, and worldviews. This approach acknowledges the diversity of human experiences and the dynamic nature of culture, allowing theology to evolve and adapt to changing social contexts. So yes, Christianity was started as a way to broaden the olive branch. And people think that the olive branch is talking about not the faith, the Jewish community. So that if other people want to be Jew, they should be a Jew. They don't have to be born into the faith to be part of the Jewish community and the Jewish community or brotherhood. There has to be another way. If they follow our community standards, then they should be accepted. If they follow our way of life, and if they believe on me, if they believe on me and I'm part of you, then now they are part of you too. So we are part. So Christians and Jews are supposed to be part of the same community. Okay, the community in the sense that because we embrace Jesus, then we are now part of the community. That was the idea, to be part of the Jewish community, which was the ideal at the time. This approach acknowledges the diversity of human experiences and the dynamic of nature of culture, allowing theology to evolve. Now, I'm going to wrap up at 2 minutes and then I'm done. Furthermore, the transcendence of theology over culture can lead to imposition of dominant cultural norms and values onto marginalized communities, perpetuating systems of power and inequality. Again, the transcendence of theology over culture can lead to the imposition of dominant cultural norms and values onto marginalized communities, perpetuating systems of power and inequality. And I've argued that in the second book coming up, because there are some people there, because of the religious stance that they have taken, it locks them into certain decision making, much to the benefit of the post-colonials and the post-colonial masters who have passed on their religion to them, because that's great. Jamaican tourism can't compete with some other countries' tourism because they don't use, there are some things that Jamaicans will do and will not do that will, based on their Christian traditions. Okay, And so that's what we're talking about. So embracing cultural diversity within theology fosters inclusivity, allowing for the voices and perspective of marginalized groups to be heard and valued within religious discourse. This is my conclusion. In conclusion, we talk about they're having a symposium tomorrow about how do we address crime and violence, embracing cultural diversity, a Caribbean theology that embraces cultural diversity within theology, fosters inclusivity, allowing for the voices and perspectives of marginalized groups to be heard and valued within religious discourse. That is how we respond. In conclusion, the relationship between theology and culture is a dynamic and complex one, with both perspectives offering valuable insights into the nature of religious belief and practice. While some argue for the transcendence of theology over culture, emphasizing universal truths and principles, others advocate for the embeddedness of theology, we call it immanence of God, as against the transcendence of God. Others advocate for the immanence of God, the embeddedness of theology within culture, acknowledging the diversity of human experiences and the importance of cultural context. Ultimately, the challenge lies in finding a balance between these perspectives, recognizing the universality of religious truths while respecting the diversity of cultural expressions and interpretations. And that's the end. And by the way, I have written, actually, I have written all of this. That's it for class. Thank you, guys. Chanel Hall is here. Welcome aboard, Chanel. I don't know what happened to Alan. He didn't come to class today. He's not in class today. I don't know what's going on. Anybody know what happened to Alan? Why didn't he make it? I don't know, but thank you, guys.
I'm sorry, I don't know what happened to Alan. I'm not sure what happened.
Oh, but thank you guys for making it Caribbean Thought. And this is the last class until you do your exam. I fully appreciate you guys. This class didn't have a lot of people this year. I mean, over the past couple of semesters I've taught, we've had 10, 15, 18, 25 people. Today this semester we didn't have a lot of people in the class. I'm not sure why, but but usually summer classes are full, but to be honest, I'm so happy for the small group that we had, and you guys you still have works to turn in. So if you have questions, please email me. My WhatsApp is not working. I'm not sure. I'm under a lot of attack. You see what I talk about. So of course I'm going to be attacked. I talk about unpopular stuff. So they will try to manage you. They'll try to manage how much money you can make. They try to block you. The people in the status quo. I mean, I understand that this one woman was blocked. Her book was thrown out, and they threw out of the US because of what she was preaching. And you see the people we study. I take on heavy subjects and heavy topics, and so I pray that you will pray for me as I be a beacon of truth, and I try to serve the world today to solve tomorrow's challenges by making popular what was a monopoly. Which is a pleasure teaching you guys, and you allowing me this time to share with you. And while teaching, it also facilitated an opportunity to develop my ideas and my thought. So thank you guys, and I'm looking forward to the future and what it holds for you and for me. I will be in Jamaica in May, so between May 17th and May 20th. So hopefully, and I'll be in Kingston. Hopefully I get a chance to see you guys. All right, that's it. Anybody? Any final questions? Yeah.
Last word. I would just like to say thank you for teaching us. It was informative, and it wasn't from the textbook or much more like read off of the slide. It's more of discussions and your own ideas and opinions, which weren't really judged. So thank you for talking about the controversial topics.
Except for the obia part.
Except for the obia part. controversial, taboo things that we as Caribbean people don't really talk about. It's not that we don't talk about it because we only know some of us only know slightly about it. It's not really broadcasted in the social media or on regular channels. So it's good to be informed. Not from we didn't expect it from this probably because I didn't really think that my degree would encompass some of this, but it's good to know.
Yes, and I remind me to send you a copy of remind me to send you a copy of this of remind me to send you a very important document. Okay. Just send me an email, say Rev or Prof or Rem. Remember to send us that document that you will need that will help you to prepare for the exam. But I'm not gonna send it to you yet until you guys, until I know you guys have been watching the videos for the class, because I think many of you still haven't watched the video. And if you watch the video, it's a lot of material, a lot of resources. You guys should watch the videos, and I change it and I make it into a production that you guys can watch. All right, Alyssa or Felmin? No, sorry, who wanted to say something? Alyssa?
Oh, I was going to say something. I'm not sure, Felmin, but I just wanted to concur with what Gavion said. It was an excellent semester. I don't think coming into it, I would have thought that the class would have taken the direction that it did. And I can certainly say, you live in a space and you think one thing, and then you realize some of what you think you don't really know. And sometimes what go so don't really go so, and sometimes it don't even nearly go so.
Yes.
So I'm very, very appreciative, and I just want to say thank you, sir. And I wish you all the very best.
Thank you so much, and you're welcome. Let's pray. Lord God, we thank you for this amazing semester. We thank you for the students. They are about to sit their exams. We believe that God is than that which nothing greater can be conceived or imagined. Greater. Our minds are limited, yet you contend with the limitations of mind. However, there are those who have, in their limitations, have sought to privilege their ideas, creating complexities and draconian policies and a society of war and conflicts. But you are God, not I. And you understand all things. And you relate to us in unique ways because you are God. And you have made us in so many different ways. So what smiles back at you is what you have made in the uniqueness of our ways. Oh, we smile back at you in our Christianity. We smile back at you in our Muslim traditions. We smile back at you in the Pocomania tradition. We smile back at you in the Church of Scientology. But there are so many ways you have revealed yourself to people. Okay? And what we have done is that we have used that to pay homage to you in our various ways. Let us not privilege our positions and our ideas, but help us to be humble, yet excited to share how remarkable God is and how we have in our own personalities and the limitations of self chose to express that revelation, knowing that God is still beyond us and than that which nothing greater can be conceived or imagined. The half has never been told. We don't know much, but may we be humbled by what we know, and may we serve others. Look at the Good Samaritan. The Jews don't like the Samaritan back in the day. That's what they wrote in the Bible. But although they have different perspectives of faith and different traditions and cultures, in the Jewish Bible, or a Jewish writer still spoke of this Good Samaritan. And so, Lord God, help us to be like the Good Samaritan and embrace others and entreat with others so that this world can be a better place. There's so much conflict in the world today because of privilege and position and status. But may we embrace each other. May we love one another. I mean, I think Lord God, I thank what the Jamaicans that are here in the US for the Penn Relays, quite a few, lots happening in Philly. We come against crime and violence. We come against any issues that may develop. We pray against peace. We pray for peace and safety, Lord God. We pray for Alyssa, Felmin, Chanel, and Gavian. May you open up their brains, their minds, help them to do exploit. Grant them your favor. May they experience your presence and your power in a palpable and profound way. Reveal yourself to them every day by who they meet. Because the Bible says the heavens declare the heavens declare the beauty of God. May we see your beauty not just by looking up, by those we meet, and may we also facilitate beauty by sharing the love that you have embedded in our hearts. Some of us might be going through financial issues right now. Some really serious financial issues. I pray, Lord God, that you remember those who are going through this financial issue. You said, knock and the door shall be open. Somebody wrote that. The person who wrote that must have experienced that. And I have experienced. And these kids, these children, these students, we have all experienced the hand of God. And you said, and somebody wrote in the scriptures, if I'm not, what am I going to give you bread? Somebody experienced that and wrote that to let people know we have a God who is divine, who is not too transcendent. He's near you, waiting to hear your voice, to give you what you need. And so we come knowing that and already experiencing the God of love and mercy, asking you to be with us, to journey with us in this very life is complex. Life is what we make it, and human beings have made life to be so complex and difficult. And so we call on you now, Lord God, to help us to traverse a life that we have made to be so complex and difficult, benefiting the few over the many. We are the many. May you help us to experience the few. May you keep us safe. And when we have experienced the life of the few, may we not hoard it. May we share what we have with others. Lord God, whatever decisions these students are faced with, may you help them. Give them clarity of thought. Help them to go far and wide. Expand their territories and keep them safe. Strengthen their resolve. And many of them even now may have specific needs and specific prayers. I pray, Lord God, even now they might be mentioning those prayers in their hearts. May you meet them at their point of need. These are the mercies we ask. Oh, and we pray for JTS. Some people can't pay school fee and tuition. We pray that you will make a way. Some of them won't be able to. Some people can't sit exam because they can't. I pray that every student in my Caribbean Thought class, oh God, I pray that every single one of them will be able to sit the exam and that none of them will be short on their fees so that they can't sit the exam. I pray that everyone, bless them even now. Many of them have church sisters, church brothers, families, and so on. I pray, Lord God, that you will move upon the heart of our loved ones and our friends and our families. Raise up good Samaritans to bless them, oh God. Raise up Samaritans to bless them and to empower them. And I pray that you will make them into good Samaritans too. We thank you for the blessings and for raising us up so that we can be good Samaritans and make a difference in the world. Amen. Thank you, guys.
Amen.
Yeah, man, and God bless you. And keep in touch. All right? Follow and subscribe. Okay?
Sorry, your WhatsApp not working.
No, it's not. It's not. I don't know what's going on. It's not working, and I got a big opportunity. Let me tell you, I got a major opportunity, paying a lot of money, and I was completing a very important documentation to begin that project. And suddenly, it stopped working, and I'm telling you, I'm under a lot of attack. But Lord God, I pray that you will fix my WhatsApp, fix the technology. My technology is under attack, Lord God, and bring investors And by the way, today we celebrate 3 years that my book was published, Neoliberalism. Take care, guys. And I see you soon when I go to Jamaica in May. I'm going to be on campus.
Okay, sir. Take care.
Okay, sir. Take care.